Everyone, and welcome to the Sarasota Manatee MPO meeting. This March 31st. I was thinking already we're going, but March 31st, 2025. I'm obviously not Joe Nunder. I'm Gene Brown, filling in for Chair Nunder today, dealing with some family situation and everything's fine, but just going through things he has to do. So now I will ask Ms. Eubanks to confirm a quorum. Do we have a quorum?
Yes, sir, we do.
All right, thank you. And we're expecting people to get here, being an MPO meeting, and they're working on traffic getting here. So just gotta laugh about that as we go. Thank you, Ms. Eubanks. And at this time, we'll ask everyone to please stand and we'll do the prayer and the pledge. So we'll do the prayer first. Heavenly Father, as we go through this Easter and Passover season, and we look at all of our citizens, all of elected officials, to go through the different opportunities that we have, especially on this MPO and transportation, for what we feel is probably one of the best areas in the country, the Sarasota Manatee area. But we all have to remember that as we go through this, there's ups and downs and there's things that we have to work through. And as elected officials, we have to look at the good of the whole and try to make it for everyone that will honor in what we do as our constitutional issues that we work through. As we continue to make things better for not only our long-term and generational citizens, but also all of the people that want to live here in Florida. So in your name, we always ask that you look over us and make us a better place to live, work, and play. Amen.
Amen.
Join in the pledge. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Amen.
All right, thank you. Moving on to public comment, David.
Thank you, Chair Brown. We will now open the meeting for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. The agenda item comments that are on an agenda item can be held for that agenda item unless someone is not able to stay. On the screen, you can see 4 ways for the public to provide input to the board. All comments received will be shared with the board members and made part of the public record. This meeting is being live streamed as publicly noticed and will be available on METV and the MPO YouTube page. Ms. Eubanks, did we receive any comments? I know we did.
Yes, we did. We received four emails. For the public record and will be kept for the public record. We received emails from Howard and Lisa Jelks, JLKS, whose family was involved in donating the land in Sarasota County, and they are opposed to Northport using conservation lands to solve inadequate housing and transportation planning, and they are here to speak. We also received emails from Nancy and Thomas Edmondson, which are of opposition to Northport using preserved lands purchased by Sarasota County residents for roadways, and ask the 2025 priority list not fund the PD&E study. Thank you.
Thank you.
And there were actually other emails that were received on that topic, I believe. And I would suggest that those who are able to stay for the item speak at that time, if that's acceptable to the chair.
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Okay. All right. So at this time, we'll call for public comment. I do have one that would be probably now is Ms. Simmons. If you'd like to come forward to the open public comment, and you have 2 minutes. Yes, go up to the podium. Yes, ma'am. Welcome, Ms. Simmons.
Good morning. Pat Simmons, Manatee County. The reason I came today is I was driving past 34th Street and 60th Avenue West. And right at that corner is a bus stop. And that bus stop has a ramp up to it, but it's completely surrounded by grass. There's no sidewalk on either side, no sidewalk down to the street to catch a bus. So I got to thinking that maybe we need to do a study on the accessibility of bus stops in this region, because 14th Street is a mess. And that's what I would like to see done, because if there's that one useless bus stop, I don't even know if a bus even stops at a bus stop. I have no way to know. But if it does, it's definitely not handicap accessible. So I would like to see you and sometime in the future look into this and see just how many bus stops truly are accessible in this region. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to go to on, is there anybody that wants us to speak on 8B that's not going to be able to stay? Because that'll be later in the meeting. Yes, sir, if you want to come forward.
Could you just clarify when you might get to 8B?
Yeah, it's going to be a little while, so I don't know if it's 20 minutes or an hour, but it's going to be.
Chair consider moving that up on the agenda since there's so many people that want to speak on
Mr. Hutchinson, is that?
I'm thinking that the commissioner from Northport is en route also.
Route. So let's see when the commissioner comes in, how far we've got along, and I'll consider that at the time. Because we obviously want the Northport representations. Yeah. All right. I have no other public comment. Is there somebody that wants to talk off agenda item? Do the commissioners have any comments about what was just said by Ms. Simmons?
Yeah, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
We are looking at that particular bus stop. I actually got pictures of it last night from staff. So it is something that Ms. Simmons brought to our attention. We are looking at it. It does make sense to do a full inventory and assessment of all of our transit stops to see if there are other ones in similar situations and whether or not it makes sense to put some funds into making sure. I mean, it does seem silly to have ramps up to something that is surrounded by grass. You can't really use a ramp on a wheelchair if you can't get there with the wheelchair. But this is a specific stop we are looking into, and I did just get an email probably 12 hours ago about it.
All right, and Commissioner Cruz, I agree. In city of Bradenton, there's some areas that they have the ramp, but you actually have to go on the road system to get to the ramp to get on. And that's been discussed before. I know there is through our studies that we've done on 41 in Bradenton and some on our LECOM study that some of that's being looked at even as we're going forward with those over the next couple of years. Mr. Hutchinson.
Yes, several years ago, FDOT funded and the MPO and the transit agencies worked on assessments of handicapped accessibility at all of the bus stops, and a lot of progress has been made, but it's slow, and the cost of putting in bus stops was connected to that. The transit agencies might want to report on that during the Public Transportation Task Force section of this meeting, which is next. But it is on the radar, and it's good to get specific locations that people have had an issue with. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. All right, at this time, we'll go to agenda item number 4, the Public Transportation Task Force. First, we have Manatee County. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Susan Montgomery. I'm your transit planner at MCAT in the Public Works Department of Manatee County Government. My day job is writing bus schedules and scheduling operators and making the technology work on the bus. So let me get to my presentation. This is one of our new veterans wrapped vehicles. That happens to be a handy bus. All right, we just want to kind of go over and show you that our ridership is increasing. Our ridership increased dramatically this year. We began counting riders in a new way. We use automatic passenger counters rather than relying on the bus operator to press a button. We think this is much more accurate and much more efficient. So you'll notice those white bars are a lot higher than the others. That's really important, and that will help us with our grant funding. All right. Next topic. We have started in January a Veterans on Demand service. Eligibility is done by the Manatee County Veteran Services Department, and trips can be booked through a phone number or a mobile app. And Veteran Services is actually training veterans how to use that mobile app so that they can book rides efficiently. We use a back-end digital platform, and the rides are contracted with Lyft. So far, we've provided about 80 trips, maybe 10 a day. Riders are limited to healthcare and pharmacy destinations. They are limited to 2 trips there and back each day. So again, Manatee Moves is the name of the program. All right, we have worked with Breeze Transit to update the federal funding requirements. This is a very difficult topic for me because changing the federal funding is a big hit to our budget. And our efforts in working with Sarasota County was to lessen the impact of that. And so the first year, the grant funding will be split 55-45%. The second year, 60% to Sarasota and 40% to Manatee. And then beyond that, we will use a formula that is almost identical to the one the federal government uses to distribute the money. This has the potential to cost Manatee up to $2 million a year in grant funding. It is the right thing to do, and we have moved to talk with our commission, and we have gone forward with it. So this will be in effect beginning at the next appropriation this fall. All right. Currently, Manatee County is purchasing on-demand transportation on Longboat Key. We're paying Sarasota County's on-demand service at a per-trip cost. We're paying $30.60 per passenger per trip, and the cost of the passenger is about $2. You'll notice the drop in October, we did not operate due to Hurricane Milton. But you can again see that February and March are our peak times, as you would expect on a barrier island like that. Okay. And looking forward, just want to let you know some of the things we're working on. Our transit development plan, which is a plan for our transit system going forward. We're going to update that this year. It will probably go to the Commission on Consent. We're updating our transit development service plan, which helps us serve the less fortunate in Manatee County and understand the impacts of the growing senior and disabled population in Manatee County, how that impacts our services. We are working on our Title VI program, which ensures that we do not discriminate. And finally, we're working on some changes to fixed route that will start in the fall that are in line with a comprehensive operations analysis. This will be big changes for our customers, but we think we can provide more efficient service. And I just want to comment on your comments. We will take a look at that stop at MCAT as well. In many cases, we are working with the Florida Department of Transportation to provide better sidewalk connections on US 41. There are some serious issues there that we are well aware of. And many times, in order to save money, we have put the landing pad in, but not constructed the sidewalk. And you have identified a place where we did such a thing. So we will look into it. I will work with the Manatee County Transportation Planning Division, and we will find a way to get it done. So are there any questions?
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, thank you. On the Veterans On Demand service, you had listed here that there were 80 trips since January 7th, 2024. Did you have a benchmark in mind of trips that you were looking at getting?
We have no idea. We weren't sure of the demand when we started this, and we wanted to get it up and running as quick as possible. So we have not done thorough demand analysis.
Okay. And on because I don't know, it seemed like 80 trips was a little bit low. I would think something like that would be in high demand. But maybe I'm wrong. That's why I asked first if you had a number in mind. In 80 trips, how many unique users were included in the 80 trips?
I'm not aware of that
Okay.
answer to your question. However, I think that probably what is slowing adoption is that veterans have to be approved by the Veteran Services Department. So the outreach is really done by Manatee County's Veteran Services Department, and they're advertising our program and they're registering people for the program. And that takes time to reach all of their varied customers.
So maybe it's like the qualification that's sort of slowing the process up. And once people get signed in. And
Again, we've not
program.
done public promotion of this
Okay.
route.
And qualifying doesn't seem to be an issue, or?
I don't know specifically what they do, but it could be as simple as showing your DD 214
Okay,
and you're
okay,
in.
because I did notice it says, you have to qualify for it. Um,
And Veteran Services manages that, and I'm not aware what the requirements are.
Okay, all right, thank you. It's just.
Of course.
Thank you. I have Commissioner Bearden and Council Member Coker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The way that you have implemented the on-demand services for veteran services in such a quick manner has been unbelievable. I know that with some of the veterans that have reached out to me, they have been very, very happy with that particular service. I know a service like that takes time to implement because of the coordination that it takes to be able to connect the veteran with that particular service. And I know that this is just the beginning, but I foresee in the future, many, many more people, veterans, utilizing that. Any veteran that has, has to go to the VA for any type of services are veterans who qualify, right? So if they rate a 0% and they have that qualification, they are going to rate that on-demand service, which is rated by the VA within itself. So I would encourage, if you do know veterans that are out there that, could utilize this service, because we have a lot of disabled veterans right now that could utilize this service that does not know about the on-demand services, I would recommend that you let them know as we continue to get the word out and do a marketing campaign on that. Manatee County is a place for veterans, and we want to rise above the typical standard when it comes to our veterans in Manatee County. And I appreciate you and your team as far as putting that together and really implementing the on-demand services in such a fast manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Council Member Coker.
Yes, hi. I don't know if you have any information on this, but I was wondering if you could report anything since you've increased the number of days for the water taxi, what the ridership looks like for that?
I do not have access to that. The Manatee County Convention and Visitors Bureau tracks that, and we do not track that. The only thing that we do is we've placed some technology on the ferries so that they can be seen in our mobile app. But if you would like, I will get with the Convention and Visitors Bureau and get that data to you.
Great. I think it'd be great if at all of our meetings that it be reported, because it is, I think, quite a few trips, if I'm not mistaken, so.
Yes,
it's
I,
great to
I
include it.
understood
Yeah.
recently that they were at peak capacity. So,
Yeah, and I think something on that, thank you for bringing that up, Councilwoman Coker, that when you look at it, we know that it's taking hundreds of cars off the road a day when it's, in full force, and it's going now with spring break and coming into the summer. We do know that the new bigger boat will be here sometime this summer, which will actually increase the number of days operable because of the type of boat, as well as increase up to like 100+ members. And I think that's something that's going to come down not only in this position, but others positions on the Sarasota County Commission and the city of Sarasota, where I've said it many times, where you want to be able to leave downtown Bradenton and end up in downtown Sarasota with a lot of stops in between. That would be not only just a great business aspect in our community, but also taking cars off the road and just really be cool. If you could go from either one of our cities to the other city with a lot of stops in between. And I know we have a new member here in Mayor Chappie, and his is the only one that's going from downtown Bradenton to Bradenton Beach now because of the hurricanes. And I think that's probably helping, make some of those businesses on Bridge Street survive now, as well as the whole city coming back, because we know the devastation that was on our islands as well in some of our inlet areas. But that's something that's great. I do have one question, and if you can go back to the slide with the split between the two counties as we go forward, and explain to us again why one is more than the other and it's changing.
the reason it's changing is that in 1986, there was an agreement to split the federal allocation 50-50. Most other areas use a formula that takes into account the size of the agency and the service provided. And in this case, Sarasota County is larger than us and provides more service. So we wanted to reflect that in our formula and use a formula consistent with lots of other urbanized areas. So that is the reason for the change. It is a hard change for us to make.
I just want people to understand that, and also that, as it changes back, Manatee County is growing at a faster population rate possibly than Sarasota County is, if you look at projections, and that could then swing back if things change. And also, we want to make sure that we are splitting it fairly, but also counting it fairly. So I think that's something that's important for all of us to understand. I know what's fair is fair and make it right.
Well, we've agreed to use National Transit Database numbers, and those are very specific, and the federal government has tons of rules about what those numbers are, and Sarasota County follows them just as we do.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Hearing none. Thank you very much, Mrs. Montgomery. We'll move on to the Sarasota County Breeze quarterly report. Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. Jane Grog, Director of Transit for Sarasota County. There we go. Thank you so much for having me this morning. I know that at the last meeting, our Planning and Performance Manager, Megan Louie, gave our update, and there were quite a few questions about the on-demand service. And so I'm going to touch quickly on our ridership information and then touch on some of those questions that were lingering after the last meeting. Like Manatee County, Sarasota County is rebounding from the hurricanes. So our numbers since October on ridership has been a little bit lower than what we saw in 2024. And we're looking forward to our seasonal numbers coming in and seeing that rebound. We show this ridership chart each time. Each of the bands relate to the different services we provide, and you can see that low dip in October, potentially due to those days that we were closed for service related to the storm that had quite an impact. We were, however, able to reallocate those resources to perform rescues and other necessary emergency transportation. So quick orientation that Breeze is the name we use for all of our services. Our Breeze name by itself is what we use for our fixed route service, our buses and our trolleys. And these on the map are shown in the bold lines with the numbers. And then the Breeze on Demand is a general public rideshare program. And that's in the 3 green zones shown on the map. And those trips have to start and end in a zone, but they're open to the general public. Anyone can use that service. And then our Breeze Plus serves our paratransit services, and that's shown in that 3/4 mile buffer around all of our fixed route services. That's required by the Federal Transit Administration. And the maximum grant money that we can spend on that is 10% of our operating, whereas on regular transit lines, we can spend up to 50% on our both our bus and our on-demand service. So what's of note related to the paratransit service, the Breeze Plus, it is the most expensive service that we offer. There are lots of requirements for the vehicles, the time in the vehicles, and the characteristics of that service. So that is provided at a cost of $54 a trip. So definitely a desire to continue seeing how we can find efficiencies in this area. Historically, our transportation disadvantaged riders have used Breeze Plus, and since we've instituted the general on-demand service in the green areas, when people are making trips in those areas, we're trying to shift the TD and the ADA riders to use the on-demand service. That is quite a cost savings to us as a provider, and we also incentivize them with their fares for that service as well. I'd like to give a brief background, reminder, refresher for those that know this, and an update for those that this may be new. Why did we make the shift and how did we make that shift to on-demand? And so in 2019, we looked at our 2018 bus performance, and we looked at the ridership and how much it costs to provide those services. So just as it's a fixed route on a particular road, it's also a fixed cost regardless of how many people are riding the bus. So we took the service costs and divided by the riders by route. And those that had really high cost per trip routes were the ones that were targeted for change. And so that line is close to where we identified the above and below, the keep and the eliminate. And the funds that were previously spent on those fixed route bus lines, there were about 14 or so, 14, 15 of those routes that were eliminated or modified. And that money was specifically reinvested into that on-demand service. So in 2021, the routes in blue were the ones that were eliminated. The funds that were supporting those were reinvested into the purple on-demand area zones. And the yellow routes were those higher performing fixed routes that we maintained. The on-demand service is a very technology-focused service that we provide. We receive lots of data and information from every trip, at least 130 points of information for every trip. So there's the capacity to do lots of analysis for that. The service can be booked either through an online app, or you can also call a central number to reserve your trip. I'm happy to share that approximately 92% of all on-demand trips are booked through the app. So quite an uptake of that technology and that service. And riders, these are a shared ride. So they're not a single ride like Uber and Lyft, where it's just you and your party. 63% of the time, riders are matched with others who you're picking up and dropping off along the way. It's a very dynamic system for that purpose. And once someone makes that trip request, if a vehicle can get there within 30 minutes, they will be secured for that particular trip. And the standard fare right now is $2 with a $1.50 discounted price for those TD trips. The fare structure is something that is subject to the Board of County Commissioners. They're looking at a change, and last week gave staff direction to work on that further. So we've seen great growth in the service. June 2021 was when we launched the service. We've had over 1 million riders in that time, growing year over year. And the average estimated time of arrival when you request your trip is about 18.5 minutes. Very happy to see the 4.9 stars out of 5 rating from our riders. And related to the funding, I know that's been a question as well. Around 2023 or so is the time at which those funds that were reinvested, the savings, so to speak, from the eliminated routes covering the on-demand service, that the growth started to outpace that funding. And so there was additional funding that was made available to continue the growth of the program. And part of what supported that was COVID money from the federal government. In 2024, the on-demand service in all the zones cost about $5.6 million. 37% of that was funded by grants, 11% by fares, 2% revenues from our agreement with Manatee County, and 48% by Sarasota County general revenue funds. So one of the other things I wanted to mention was across the zones, our gross cost per trip is $14.68 per trip. And then the general fund or net cost is $7.14. So you saw earlier where we were comparing that to bus routes previously. I want to show one slide in one of our zones, definitely a shift in that efficiency, and that's in Northport. The Northport specific zone has a gross cost per trip of $11. And if you compare that to the 2019 numbers of those eliminated routes, there were 2. Those were running $26 to $29 per trip. So quite a cost savings, but an even more astounding note is that in 2019, there were 22,000 trips served by those bus routes. And last year, we served over 200,000 trips in the on-demand in Norfolk. So highly expanding the access to transportation and ensuring that those who need transportation have access to that going forward as well. I mentioned the cost per trip is slightly different in each zone depending on the usage and the efficiency. Our Lido Longboat Zone, which is the one that we share with Manatee County, is a bit higher than that. And in our agreement, we adjust the annual cost each year, and we just did that. And the number, Susan shared that it was about $30. That was for 2024. And in 2025, we're glad that the efficiency has improved, and that's dropped about $1 per trip. So we're able to pass that savings on as well, and continuing to look for other ways to improve the efficiency in that zone and all of our zones across the community. The other thing I want to end on is that I mentioned that our Breeze Plus service is quite costly to provide. And my team has been aggressively marketing those TD and ADA riders that are within the on-demand zones. They also developed a new functionality within the on-demand zones to prioritize those riders. So while the general public requests a trip at the time they're ready to take it, the TD riders get the privilege of booking their trips up to a week or so in advance, and they can confirm their trip to the doctor, their work trip, and they're not subject to getting that message that a vehicle is not available right this minute and you need to try again later. So we've seen a great migration, hope that it continues, of Breeze Plus riders shifting over to our on-demand zones. And we're continuing to monitor that each week and each month. We started that pre-reservations in November, and we plan to use that experience to create more capacity overall, both for TD riders and the general public. So the more trips we can provide at a lower cost per trip, if we're providing the service in the same hours, then we can reach more people. So we look forward to continuing that effort and potentially expanding the way that we offer service going forward. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. We just heard this report a couple days ago, but I learned some new information from it today. On the grants, you said that 37% of your funding comes from grants. Are those state grants, federal grants? Do you know the split between that?
Those were all federal grants.
All federal grants.
And
Okay.
some were our formula funding, the 5307 that we were discussing just a bit ago about the split, and some were COVID funding last year.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. On the Breeze Plus, what, you said that that is a very costly program, and understandably so. I think introducing that, the ability to reserve ahead of time is very, very important. I can imagine a lot of those are for folks having medical visits. You need to get there on time, you know, and so that's an important aspect of the program. So I encourage you to stick with it. Do you know the percentage of Breeze Plus in the budget, what that is? Let me know.
Well, it's starting, it's Breeze Plus and On Demand together is getting close to about a third of our overall budget, with the Breeze Plus being the largest portion of that.
Of the
So
third. Okay.
and that's why we're trying to continue to get as many trips out of the same amount of funding as possible.
Okay, thank you. And one other, the on-demand, have you thought about doing the reserve ahead of time piece of that?
For the TD, the transportation disadvantage and the ADA riders only is what we've established at this point. The dynamics of the on-demand system, it schedules which driver for which location real time. So I don't know if you've ever, mapped your own trip that you're driving, and then you check it along the way and it shifts and says, oh, this way is actually faster, that sort of thing. It's booking that and picking up other people along the way that are dynamically booking. So I think the opportunity to continue preserving that reserve ahead for the individuals we want to prioritize is a good effort, and we want to see how that goes before we open that up for other individuals being able to book ahead. It changes the whole dynamic of the delivery.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I did have one question on the slide you have up there. When you went from a fixed route to an on-demand service, obviously the trips went up. Do you have numbers of passengers? And I know you probably can do some dividing out with the numbers that are up there, but approximately what that did to help, and we've talked about it a little bit before in the past, but all of a sudden, if you're able to bring in, people are more apt to use an on-demand than they would by a fixed route because they can't get there.
And so by passengers, I can tell you that we've got about 34,000 unique riders of on-demand. So if you, in that nature, but I'm not sure if I'm answering the right dynamic. Otherwise, I'm just counting trips and not knowing who they are attributed to.
And I'm just thinking overall, because we know that sometimes fixed bus routes, even though they have a few people on them, but a lot of times you'll see empty buses driving around. And if you can get the people to where they need to be and spend that money more efficiently, it's more of a positive outcome.
So one of the things that we offer, especially in the Northport and the and Venice, Inglewood, and the downtown on-demand zone, is connecting to fixed route transit. So if you needed to travel from Northport to, say, Sarasota, you could take the on-demand to one of the fixed route locations, such as City Hall, where we've got a transfer point, and then ride Route 9 and continue on up to another part of the county. I think going forward, one of the things we'd like to explore is supporting that last mile more widely across the community. So not just in those particular on-demand zones, but is there a way to get people who are unable, even if you haven't filled out a form and qualified, et cetera, just helping others. I know I'm carrying lots of things, or when I have baby kind of a thing, how do you get all the way to the bus stop and then continue traveling?
Well, I think that's one of the things for the citizens that are out there that talk about and I think they consider both Manatee and Sarasota County, we don't have as robust of a transportation system like a New York City or other areas, but they're more condensed and people can get to it. So some of these fixed routes can make that happen. Now it's just a matter of how much time you want to spend,
Mhm.
and that's probably the biggest thing I've seen in our area is people don't want to spend the time to get there because in other places you get on, get off real quick. But when we're such a rural area, it makes it more difficult. Just an opinion, but I think that's what people will see this. And I think the on-demand service can benefit a lot more people in a shorter time.
I think that coupled with the increased frequency on our major routes also helps. We've greatly appreciated FDOT's support in increasing frequency on Route 99 that Manatee County and Sarasota County shares to 20-minute frequency, and looking for that return on the ridership, seeing that increase because you don't have to know and plan your trip as far in advance because you know there's another bus soon thereafter.
Good. Any other questions? I'm just going to make
Thank
a general comment about thanking the MPO staff, thanking Sarasota Manatee Transit, both of them, because last year we changed this meeting to 9 o'clock to get the presentation more publicly to not only the commissioners and council members up here, but also the public. And I think it's worked. And I don't know if Mr. Hutchinson, you want to say anything on that, but we were not having great attendance and weren't getting the information out. When I was chairman last year, we changed that and made it to where it was more accessible, even though it takes a little longer in this meeting, it's worth it.
It enhanced our efficiency, reduced the number of meetings, and improved attendance and awareness of the great work being done in transit in our area. We know that from our analysis of the long range plan and what we have going forward that we're going to need alternatives to automobiles in the future more than we think. And we're not anywhere near the point of proposing that all future investments be just in transit, but we know that the role of transit in our transportation system has to be increased in order to get around in the future. We know there's going to be more congestion, but mitigating that to the greatest extent possible is one of the what we try to look for.
Good. Well, thank you. Yes, ma'am.
If I just might make a comment, coming to a 9 o'clock meeting in Sarasota for people who live in the southeastern portion of Sarasota County, it is a 2-hour trip on 75. And so, and it seems every month it gets worse. And all of the exits are backed up. Laurel Road is a 2-exit departure off of 75. Both lanes were backed up onto 75. So I only bring it up. I know in the general scheme of things, perhaps the traffic issues in the southern portion of the county are not as bad as Manatee County and North County, but they are rapidly deteriorating. So I'll start planning. I apologize for being late to today's meeting. I thought an hour and a half would be sufficient, but it's not. So 2 hours when you're coming. I'd be interested in the experience that my fellow South County folks are having, those of us who really have no alternative but 75 to head north. My folks from Venice, how are you guys doing on 75?
I was late too.
All right. That's why we're sitting here in this meeting, and that's why the MPO exists.
It is ironic that I can't get to an MPO meeting. I sit on the
All right, thank you. Now, obviously, this is a little bit of a fun part of a meeting when you talk about transportation. may not be something that we directly relate to, but when you talk about what a person has done for our local transportation in the air and the years that he's been doing it, and in recognition of Sarasota-Braden International Airport President and CEO at the time, Rick Piccolo. So if you want to come up and you want to go to the podium and say anything, or
Yeah.
yes, and David will say and give thanks and recognition. But
I'd love to introduce
Yep.
Rick, who, since I started at the MPO in 2011, we've crossed paths off and on, and it's always been a great experience. He's been in the aviation industry for 53 years, starting in 1970 as a custodian at the Buffalo Niagara International Airport, working his way up through the ranks there to assistant director of operations, and then moved to Florida, worked at the Tampa and St. Pete. And since 1995, he's been the CEO of our airport, the importance of which to our regional intermodal or multimodal transportation system really can't be overstated. Its importance to our tourism industry. He's overseen lots of challenges while he's been here. And the fastest growth that of almost any airport in the country. He's played a role and been recognized at state, national, and worldwide organizations in the airline industry. He's helped keep and put our region on the map. And he's been a friend of the MPO, a supporter of transit, and I think that it's a great pleasure to. He's retiring in June, but will stay on as an advisor for a few months after that, 6 months or so. So it's a great pleasure to recognize him and to thank him for having been a good person to work with.
Mr. Piccolo.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you to the members of the MPO. I've enjoyed working with you all over the years. When I first came to the Sarasota-Bradenton area back in '95, one of the first encounters I had was with the MPO as we were going through a DRI at that time. And I'm pleased to say that our DRI applications were approved by about 70 elected officials from here all the way up to Hernando County. And they were done unanimously at every level. So we felt real good about that. I have a great team of people that have made me look good over the years, and you continue to have that after I leave. I appreciate the support I've had from all the MPOs and from the different jurisdictions, the counties, the cities. You've always been very cooperative in trying to help the airport and its growth. Obviously, the FDOT, LK and I have known each other for a very long time and can't express enough appreciation, not just for his support, but for the generosity of the grants that we receive from them for some of the capital projects. And so I hope over the years that I've been here that I've helped to contribute to improve transportation. It might be exacerbating a little bit of the roadway work because this month we'll be over 550,000 passengers for the month. We used to do that in about 6 months. So I guess we'll add a little traffic to the roadways, but we'll probably break 4.5 million passengers this year. And we have a new ground transportation center that has a new area for MCAT and SCAT that's covered and looks a lot nicer. And it's got room for drivers to have a room to go into to get out of the heat and get to vending machines and restrooms. So we're doing our best to improve the transportation here in the community. And I can't thank you enough. And I look forward to enjoying life a little bit more after I retire. It has been moved back to August 31st. Because things have slowed down a little on the search for my replacement. But that I've told the board will be it. So,
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Piccolo. And I think one of the things that I've been impressed with over all the years is, all of us have to have a great team, but you also have to have a great leader. And you've really, shown what your leadership has done through not only the political parts of things with boards, as well as the staff and the history of Sarasota-Bradenton Airport, because years ago, it was a second thought.
Yeah.
Now in this area, it's the first thought. And you've made that happen while still being so financially responsible and keeping the airport as debt-free as possible, which also brings into what the growth of that can do for our community. So just from a personal standpoint, being a generational person here, as well as now into the politics part of it, I know this whole, and there's going to be some other people that want to talk, but I think it's a great thing that you've done and we appreciate it from that
Well,
standpoint.
thank you very much. We're very pleased to be debt-free, and some of that goes to LK and the FDOT and the state support. But we've been pretty efficient at what we do.
Commissioner Bearden?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, as I said earlier, Mr. Piccolo, you have done a hell of a job. And, you know, you really took a small airport and made it a large one. And adding the extra terminals and things of that nature and having the partnership with Allegiant Airlines is second to none. And I just hope that the next person that comes and takes your place has that same type of experience, and that your board can see the next leader as the same caliber as you. So I just appreciate all the hard work that you did here, and I can't thank you enough. And I wish you the best on your retirement if I don't see you again.
All right, thank you for your kind words.
Commissioner Bishop?
Mr. Piccolo, in my previous life in Northern Virginia, I served on the Metropolitan Washington Airports Authority, as well as the mayor of Leesburg. We put together and built the terminal at the Leesburg Airport. And I can tell you that watching what you have accomplished at Sarasota has been truly inspirational. We had a few more political problems in DC, as you might guess, with Reagan National still even being open, much less carrying the volume of traffic it does. But what you have accomplished in your time here is truly remarkable. And I think you have very tough shoes to fill, but thank you for a magnificent job.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, Rick, you know, it's amazing. I've lived here most of my life, and I remember there was talk about why do we have Sarasota Bradenton Airport? Why don't we just make it a terminal to bus people to Tampa?
I remember that.
It's crazy. I mean, and the advances that you've made, the vision that you've had is truly amazing, and you've done an outstanding job. And all of us in the Sarasota Manatee area are eternally grateful for everything you've done.
Thank you so much.
Council member?
My very first impression of Sarasota was flying into Sarasota in
Sarasota Bradenton Airport. It's the Bradenton mayor. We've got to keep Bradenton in it.
I'll be teaching that to
Council
my
member
replacement.
of City of Bradenton.
That was in 1978 when it was basically like a little warehouse metal building. So I can say you're making us look good because you've so enhanced the traveler's experience with all of your growth. And so I think it pays off for all of us and making it a lot more, a better experience. So thank you and good luck.
Thank you.
Commissioner? Either one first. Mayor?
Yes, I just wanted to say similar. I was going to say what Jane said. I first came here in 1974, and yes, it was this little, little concrete block building. And the changes that have occurred over the past, during your tenure, I think you can retire and feel very proud of what you accomplished. So thank you very much, and thank you what you've done. Thank you for what you've done for the Sarasota Bradenton Airport.
Yeah, okay, I'm not going to repeat it. I do have you beat with the 74, came in 1970. But I think we have some people here in the audience who can definitely beat me on that one as well. And, I of course, I remember the little trailers and I don't look down on that. I mean, for me, that spoke to our, Sarasota Bradenton Airport as a cozy, hometowny place. And I honestly feel that the growth that you've accomplished has not left that place of still cozy, approachable. You don't have to get to the airport and think, my gosh, I've got to go and get and move, and it's too big to conceive. It still has that hometown cozy feel to it that represents both Sarasota and Bradenton very, very well. And I thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you. That's an important part in our efforts, is to make sure it remains kind of a boutique airport regardless of how much it grows.
And introducing the restaurants that are local was a big piece of that. I've seen that done in other airports, and I thank you for doing that. It's important for us to show off our local flavors, so
Yes.
to speak, pun intended.
Thank you. We want to get a picture and give you the.
Mr. Chair.
Mayor Chappie.
Yeah, I've been around a long time as well, since 19. Pretty much grew up here. Mom and dad were 1,000 miles away, so I had no choice. Rick, you've done an amazing job. You've created an amazing team, and it begins at the top with the leadership, and you are a great leader. Thank you so much for serving.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Mr.
Chair.
Yes, sir. Obviously.
Yes.
Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you. Rick, I echo everybody what they said. I think your leadership is tremendous, that you built such a great asset for this community, and you built a great team. That's why, this airport is successful, right? You talked about the partnership that the department had with all the projects, right? And the funding that you
Yes.
brought. And, I can tell that this is what we strive for, right? Bringing our resources to those assets in a community that actually makes a difference. So thank you for your leadership, and good luck with your retirement. I do have a small story. My daughter, she just graduated. She studied in Boston, and every time she flew out, she preferred Sarasota Airport. So we
Good.
drove all the way from Tampa instead of going to the Tampa airport to Sarasota Airport. And it's because of that ease in how you can get to your travel, right? And the home feeling that you get. So appreciate your leadership. Okay.
Thank you. It took a while to get that role reversed, but we're pleased to see that.
Thank you, everyone. And Rick, we want to give you just a small token with a little form here that we're going to give out, but I'd like to get everybody up together so we can get one picture of the whole group, if that's okay. Thank you. All right. Thank you for that indulgence, and the time as well worth it. Somebody that's given that to our community, as well as the long-term effect it'll have for the future. Next, we have on agenda item number 6 is Mr. Secretary of District 1 as he gets back to his seat. Mr. Secretary, you're up.
Mr. Chair, so I got a couple of updates that I want to provide. Obviously, you all know that the legislative session is ongoing. So the Governor DeSantis submitted his budget for consideration to the legislature, which is based on the recommendations that we provided, based on input from each of our MPOs, right, throughout the state. So the first version of the budget was submitted by the House and the Senate, and they're vastly different, which is pretty usual. So they go through the conference, and hopefully in the next 2-3 weeks, we'll see what the final budget looks like. We're in active conversation with leadership in both Senate and House to make sure that, what we provided as the budget recommendation is going to be reflected in their recommendations. The one thing that I wanted to mention, you may have seen in 2023, the secretary sent out a letter letting the federal government know that, we're not going to be taking the carb reduction funding. And you may have seen that the Governor DeSantis made an announcement that, we are returning all the carbon reduction funding that was provided to us at the state. And this was based on, the ideological requirements that were imposed, as part of that particular funding part, right? So what that means is it's about $49.9 million that we've already spent in the past fiscal year since the IIJA was passed. That is actually returned to the federal government. And about $271 million that's programmed in the next coming 5 years. We are actually going through the process in identifying which projects do have that particular funding and what kind of adjustments we need to make. What we found is majority of the projects do have combination of fundings because carbon reduction funding is not that big of an amount. So we're doing funding swaps and all that stuff as part of our program. My financial folks are pretty busy and every district is going through this. I do want to say that there are going to be some deletions. We'll let your MPO staff know what the deletions are going to be, right? And then the final thing that I want to mention is, one more thing. This is a result of the governor meeting with Doge. Elon Musk came down and they had a meeting about what are the opportunities for the state to look at what federal funding can be returned that the state doesn't see the need for it. And this is one of the bucket that we actually chose to give up, okay, because of the reasons that I mentioned before. The final thing that I want to mention is program planning workshop, which is a yearly workshop that we go through. It's a 3-month process, which is kind of like setting up our budget for the next year. So as the legislature is considering the budget for this upcoming year, we're already starting the process of what our budget request is going to be for the next year. And these workshops do talk about, all the program areas come in and talk about what their needs are. As an example, what does our resurfacing program size look like? What are the funding requirements to meet the statutory requirements? What is our maintenance allocations going to be? So several program areas are going to be coming and putting their request for funding. And as a board, the executive board, we decide on what level of funding we need to provide. That is going to set up what the capacity numbers are going to be looking like, right? Based on the revenue projection. So this is the start. April is the first meeting. And so we're going to do that April, May, June, and July, we make a decision on what those levels are going to be. So that's all I got, Mr.
All right.
Chair.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only question is, in regards to the funding, how are the districts, how are they determining how much funding goes to each district? Is it based on population? Is it based off revenue? What is that based on?
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Commissioner, there's different funding parts, right? So as it relates to the federal funding that is comes to the state, that particular funding, certain categories of funding is distributed based on population. So each MPO area gets certain amount of funding based on the amount of population in each of the MPO areas. Same thing, after we go through the program planning workshop and we define what the off-the-top programs need to be funded at based on the statutory requirements, we look at what our revenue, state revenue is, and whatever amount is remaining, some of that remaining money goes to statewide programs like strategic intermodal system, and the remaining money actually comes to the districts at a statutory formula.
Okay, anything? Yes, sir.
Okay, this might not be the most appropriate time, but this is the first time I've been able to say this to you at a public meeting. Thank you so much for everything you've done, especially in the last 6 months. Your team, your people literally dug our city out. We had 4 to 5 feet of sand everywhere just about. And your team moved in there and they did it in record time. And I want to thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm very, very proud of our team because over the last 2-3 years, we've helped several communities, and it's very unfortunate that, our island communities took the damage from, unexpectedly from Helene, right? And Milton. But it could not have happened without the partnerships from, Chief Cosby, right? and all the island communities and Manatee County and City of Bradenton, everybody came together and helped each other out. So we're very, very proud to help our communities.
Yeah, I just want to, if it's all right, Commissioner Bishop, I could go first on something that when people really look back at it and you look back today, we're only coming up on 6 months. And the way our communities, all of us, everyone in this room, everyone in the whole communities, with all of our partners around the state, have started to recover. Recovery in some areas is going to take longer than others, but I think one of the things that a lot of us said is go visit your island communities that got hit the hardest. And a lot of us do that more regularly than we would before, because that's important to show that we're back. And I mean, when the restaurant I went to the other night, you can definitely tell the tourists because all of their kids have the shirts on where the sleeves and they're red and their faces are red, so you see that the tourists have come back, and that's, I like to go out there and watch and see that, even though the inventory is a little different right now, things are getting better and back. And I think, you hear the emotion in Mayor Chappie's voice because it is such a long, stressful, emotional situation. And the partners stepped up at the right time. So, and I think DOT standing out there looking at it is wow. And, because it's affected a lot of people's lives forever, not just in the first 6 months. Really think about that. 6 months is all it's been. And that's not that long. So Commissioner Bishop, thank you for indulging me there.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, let me echo what John said. We also had 5 feet of sand on the entire length of Gulf of Mexico Drive. Some of our more high maintenance residents had a hard time understanding why we didn't just immediately have the sand moved. Where I'm from in Virginia, when we'd have a 32-inch snowstorm, we at least had a few snow plows, but we had to start all over again. And it was amazing what you and your staff did and the cooperation. And we would also like to thank Mayor Chappie because all of our 5 feet of sand off Gulf of Mexico Drive ended up in his beach parking lot to be cleaned before they got to put it back on their beaches. So the cooperation between the communities was tremendous. I would like to ask you, what is the half-cent tax abatement potentially on the sales tax going to do to our budgets in Tallahassee? Jim and I were just there last week, and we continue to be concerned about how many more tax cuts we can handle.
So, Mr. Chair, first I would like to thank Commissioner Bishop. And we could not have achieved, what we achieved without the partnership from your staff, Howard and Isaac and, your Public Works Director. Everybody was great to work with, so we all work together, right? So appreciate your kind words. As it relates to the legislative session and the proposals that are coming out of it, we just got to monitor it and then provide feedback and see what's the final outcome going to be. I'm in the transportation world, right? So I'm not really engaged into all this, tax cuts that are being talked about, but I would urge you guys to reach out to your legislative delegation to have conversations.
Thank you. Councilor Coker.
Yes, I know we had spoken in the past about encouraging through our legislators with regard to federal projects to move away from the discretionary and to being more based on merit. Has that had any movement at all?
So Mr. Chair, I don't think we had any slowdown as it relates to the local earmark requests, so we do have several projects at the tune of close to $100 million, both on the House and on the Senate side, that are being proposed. Obviously they got to go through the legislative session. These are all requests, right? They got to go through the legislative session, and most projects don't get what they're requested because, they're not going to be funded at the level that are requested, right? And then once that process is done, we got to see what the governor vetoes or not vetoes, right? And then we'll figure out what the impact of our program is. To answer your question, frankly, it has not slowed down. The requests keep coming in. Either if it is not through the local, you guys, like at the local agency level, it's coming through multiple other sources. So
Microphone.
I was referring to the federal.
we have not seen as many federal earmarks come through, Councilman.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you. We'll move on to the MPOAC report. Yes. Oh, okay, you got more from that. All right, sorry. We'll go back to the final part of the secretary's report.
He just said there are a lot of applications coming through. And today was actually the last day for our TA grants and our trip grants, our SIGP, all of the ones that we have at the state level, those applications that are supposed to go through the MPO. Today is the last day for us to get them at the state.
Okay.
They need to be entered into the gap. Also, I wanted to let you know that you can participate as of April 1st, which is today. Tomorrow. Oh, okay. So April Fools.
Yeah.
So as of tomorrow, 5 to 7 p.m. at the Trinity United Methodist Church in Northport, there's a public meeting for US 41 Northport safety improvements. This is an in-person public meeting. It's in an open house format. If you do need to do a virtual option, it's from 6 to 7, but you must register for that. And there is a registration out online at register.gotowebinar.com/register. And it says Northport Safety Improvements, and questions are to be directed to Selena Carroll.
Okay.
But that's your chance to participate.
Okay, good. All right. Anything else?
That's it for this
further-
part. Thank you.
District 1 report. All right, appreciate it. Moving on to the MPOAC. The first MPOAC meeting I was planning on going to got canceled because of snow in Florida. That was in the air. So then they rescheduled it, but I didn't get on that email. So it was just a little snafu. So Dave took care of that. I don't know if you want to say anything about that meeting for us, and then we can move forward with the rest of it.
Sure. Well, the meeting took place, actually the meeting took place, but they didn't have a quorum. So and maybe the email list for one reason. The next meeting is in April in Tallahassee, the 24th. And we also got the announcement of the MPOAC Institute, which is a program that the MPOAC organizes with FDOT to provide an overview of the MPO process for MPO board members and alternates. Do you have the dates? Everyone
The
should
dates
receive the
are
flyer.
Friday, May 16th and Saturday, May 17th. And that is at the Tampa Embassy Suites at Tampa Airport West Shore, which I know I've been to, others have been to that. And it is a good opportunity to get the understanding of kind of difference. So what are the different MPOs, the different terminology. I think there's a lot of, we use a lot of terminology that makes it. And it was a great, kind of go in Friday night, do it Saturday and come home Saturday night. But it was really well attended at that point I went to a couple years ago, and also well informative, to help out around the state.
If you let Nanette know, then she'll get you registered, and there's no cost to attend, and your hotel travel expenses do get reimbursed if you do attend. It's a Friday evening, most of the day, Saturday. I think it's over around 4 o'clock. Highly recommended.
All right. Thank you. Any questions? Hearing none, we'll move on to the executive director's report. Dave.
Thank you,
Hutchinson.
Chair. I guess since with all this talk of teams, I would like to recognize the MPO team here. And we're involved in planning versus operations, but I do think that our emphasis on regional resilience and working with your staffs and incorporating resilience into our planning processes does contribute to the overall resilience of our regional transportation system. I'd like to thank thank them and your staffs for that work. One thing that was announced at one of the MPOAC meetings was the passing of Paul Gugelman, who had served as counsel to that organization and also one of the counsels for our MPO for a number of years. And just wanted to let you know of that. His firm has, appointed a replacement, so there's no loss of coverage. And I think that, they're there when we need them. An update on our office relocation. You may recall that the airport hangar in which we're located changed hands a little over a year ago, year and a half ago, and the new owners let us know that, that they're planning to conduct maintenance operations and a full-scale operation there versus having a plane come and go occasionally. So we've been on the lookout for new space, working with Manatee County staff, who is our bill payer agency, and they asked us to contact a commercial realtor, which we did, and we were looking at multiple locations in both counties. Most are very expensive or not on a transit line or different issues, don't have the space, but and when we thought we found one and somebody leased it out from under us with no preconditions. So we're back to where we have some potential locations, and hopefully by May, we'll have enough detail to bring it to the board for your approval to authorize the chair to execute any documents and work with we'll be continuing to work with county staff to get that before the Manatee board. You and the MPO are parties to the lease, and so we'll hopefully have some good news in May. We've been looking in a basically an area bounded by State Road 70 to the north, Fruitville Road to the south, US 41, and out towards Lakewood Ranch Boulevard area.
So have you looked at possibly having an event space with it, if there's anything?
Yes, that is definitely a consideration, and being able to host, having a room almost this big. Don't know if it'll be big enough for board meetings or not this is big enough. So it's something that we always thought we would try. The last space, it didn't really fit. Hopefully that's the case, or there would be a space nearby, but the location would be as close to the county line as we can get. And if there's a university nearby, we did check with both county administrators to see if they had space, and both counties are, they're having space issues themselves. So
we know that transportation is an issue. Some of us would like it closer to where we live, some closer to where they live, but
Right.
I know it's a tough, to be on the county line is just probably going to be impossible.
Yeah, and accessibility from I-75 will be important.
Important, right? Well, good luck on that.
An update on that. We've also, we have been undergoing our general planning consultant procurement that has to be done every 3 to 5 years, and it was time, and we've gone through that, and the contract language has been reviewed and approved by Florida Department of Transportation, and we're working with the selected consultants to create the new contracts, and hopefully plan to bring those to you in May. And there's a long-range transportation plan workshop that should be hopefully on your calendars for April 28th. Where we'll be talking about the cost feasible plan and get into some of the nitty gritty of the LRTP. The elements of that are being pulled together. And we should be, by May, have some early draft language for parts of the document, and you'll start to see it take shape so that it can be adopted in, September, October timeframe, probably the October meeting. There's a deadline that's federally set 5 years from when the last one was adopted. The MPOAC Weekend Institute in May, federal certification meeting July 16th. That'll be an all-day affair at our office, wherever that may be, probably still right where it is. in May 16th, possibly something on the 17th where they would do site visit. And if you're able to attend any part of that, please feel free to. We'll send out the agenda once that's set by Federal Highway. Secretary Nandum talked about the challenges of the work program and the carbon reduction fund. So we've been assured that they will be communicating, collaborating, and working with us to identify what projects that are in the work program will get changed or deleted. And we will, of course, push hard to try to minimize impacts on the MPO's priorities. Two other things in May, just as a heads up, FDOT will be bringing us a very informative overview of their corridor program and how that's going. And I think they're going to talk to us a little bit about another initiative, which is involving air services and vertical takeoff and landings. And they're not talking helicopters, but maybe drone-like vehicles that they're looking to have a stakeholder workshop this summer. And they're going to be looking for sites where these things can take off and land throughout the region. And so a lot of exciting, good stuff going on as well.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Hutchinson? Hearing none, we'll move on to the MPO chair report. What I'm going to do first is ask to my left with Chair Cruz to kind of just introduce yourself. And if you're a new member or an alternate, just say that so everyone will know who's here as we go through this part of it.
Yeah, Commissioner George Cruz, Manatee County, new this year, alternate for prior years.
All right.
Barbara Langdon, Commissioner, City of Northport. I've sat on this board for several years now.
Commissioner Jason Bearden from Manatee County. This is my first year.
Nick Pashota, Mayor of Venice, and I believe this is wrapping up my first year.
John Chappie from Anna Maria Island. This is my first time for a while as the chair representing all three island cities, Anna Maria, Holmes Beach, and Bradenton Beach.
Jen Ahern Koch, City Commissioner at Large for the City of Sarasota. I sat on this board as alternate, and this is, I believe, my second year as a member.
Liz Alpert, Mayor, City of Sarasota, and this could possibly be 10 years for me. So I'll have to look it up for sure, but I've been on the commission, which is 10 years.
Mark Smith, Sarasota County, and this is my second year on the board.
Jane Coker, City of Bradenton, and this is my 5th year.
DJ Bishop, Longboat Key, my 5th year as an alternate. Unfortunately for us, my term limited out and is now in New Zealand having a lovely holiday.
Good. And Gene Brown, Mayor, City of Bradenton. It's immediate past chair, vice chair now, helping out. And I think it's been 8 or 9 years coming up on it. So we appreciate everyone's work and even everyone, as important as transportation is to all of us and every day you see it, no matter where you go, we got to keep working and we got to keep trying to make things better. I don't see any elected officials in the audience unless I'm missing somebody. I just wanted to recognize and, everyone's important, but don't see any out there. So, all right. At this time, is there anything else that you would think of that Joe would want to say, if anything important? So
I think
nothing that I go and not yet. So, all right. So moving on to consent agenda. We'll now have on to number 7, the consent agenda. Mr. Hutchinson will read the title of each item into it. And I know we've already possibly going to have some updates.
Yes, there's one addendum item. The consent agenda consists of the approval of the Sarasota Manatee MPO Board regular meeting minutes of January 27th, 2025, and the Charlotte County Punta Gorda and Sarasota Manatee MPO's joint meeting minutes of January 27th, 2025. A update to the Destination Zero advisory group policy, the ratification of the transportation disadvantaged bylaws. And the addendum item is a unified planning work program and administrative modification, not changing the bottom lines. And it includes the addition of safety countermeasures, performance monitoring analysis that will help inform the long-range plan.
All right, so Commissioner Ahern Cott.
Yes, just for the record, I wanted to state that I submitted some non-substantive changes to both sets of minutes, and I believe some substantive changes to one set of minutes with the infinite funds. That would be substantive. Somewhere it's stated in there that there were infinite funds available, which I thought was pretty dreamy.
So
the updates have been noted and corrected. Okay. Thank you. So is that a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
Move approval.
Approval,
Second.
second. Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, it's approved unanimously. All right, now we're going on to the action item, starting with 8A Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, a DOT. So we have Pam's going to come back up and yeah.
So yes, I'm back again. This is for the Transportation Improvement Program. They are the amendments to the TIP. We have two projects that are on this. We have project 456052, which is just the traffic signals, the ITS equipment purchase. It's capital, and then because there is new funds that were added to this project in the amount of $2,500,000. We did this for Manatee earlier. Now we are doing it for Sarasota. So it's just so that the capital is available as they need to put the traffic signal boxes and work with the traffic signal ITS equipment. The next project is 454169-1. It's a 5310 capital Sarasota Bradenton UZA for Easter seals. This is a transit project that's funded through the FTA 5310 program. This is a new project, so the funds are 50-50 match of $100,000 for each.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
I just had a quick question on our sheet here that identifies the item. It says that the tip on both of them, it says the tip, the funds in fiscal year 2025 and fiscal year 2025. Is that meant to be?
Correct. If you look at it, let me see if I can find that part of it.
I think it references prior to fiscal.
Yeah, that's what it had.
2025
It had the
and
different
fiscal year 2025.
signage there.
Say that one more time.
Prior to 2025 and 2025.
Okay.
Because
I
when we
missed
do
that
the STIP
part.
amendments
Okay.
at the state, we can only affect fiscal year 25 at this point in time.
Okay.
Until things roll, then we can go into the next fiscal year. But in order to pick up the past year, it needed to have 2025 done, and then that will pick up the past year too. It'll adjust that.
I think it was just missing the prior to piece of it. Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I have an approval to for the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP amendments.
Show.
Yep. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
By Mr. Smith. And, all right, so we have a motion and a seconded, and this has to be by show of hands. All in favor, say aye. All right, chair votes aye. Is there any opposed? Is that Mayor, is that opposed or that was an aye? She had for aye. Okay, so no opposed. All right. She kept it up. I wanted to make sure. I thought that, but all right, so it was unanimous. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And now we're moving on to 8B with Ryan Brown. And I know that we have several public comments. We'll go over that, but we'll let you do your presentation first and then
Sure.
get the.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know we have a number of comments, so I'll make this brief. I know this was brought to you in January as well. This is our annual exercise of pulling forward applications from our local jurisdictions for our project priorities. I'll be working closely with the department on these submittals. We've received a number of applications. I think the number is north of 150 now, and we will be working with the department on getting these programmed. Typically, those funds become available in the outer year, also known as the 5th year of the work program. In some cases, there have been projects that have been moved out or delayed, and some funding becomes available in the near term. So we've also been working with the department on making sure all federal allocated and assisting them in state allocated funds on your local priorities. Like I said, we've got all but one jurisdiction signed applications. We will need those as soon as possible. They know that those need to be submitted. We're working with the department on getting all those transferred over. As I said, there are a few projects in there. If there's any specific questions you might have about the order of the list, any of the project scoring, or any of the projects that might have shown up, please let us know. We're happy to take any comments from you all.
Okay, Commissioner.
Yes, thank you so much. I do have some specific questions
Sure.
about the ordering of this. We were just up in Tallahassee and we spoke with some folks up there at FDOT. I had brought this up at the last meeting as well, about under multimodal emphasis corridor. The third item down, 433.
Yep.
276-1, the roundabout projects at MLK and Myrtle. They're shown here as funded and they are not actually funded because there's new right-of-way acquisition that is necessary. And when we spoke to the folks at FDOT, they had recommended that it would help if this project moved up into priority. So I don't know if they're listed here in priority or not. And I wanted to share with the group, with the MPO board here, and I believe I mentioned this last time, but I do have a handout that I gave to Nanette, and she will make that available by email to everybody. I made 5 copies of it. And on the copies we have from Destination Zero. Number 3 is the stretch from US Tamiami Trail to MLK. I'm sorry, it's US Tamiami Trail from MLK to 9th Avenue. And that would include MLK and Myrtle, both intersections. The number of fatal crashes is 55. The next highest number of fatal crashes is 15 on that stretch of road. The KSI crashes is 388. The next one is at 315. And then the next lowest is in the 200s. So this stretch of road has by vast majority 55 fatal crashes. Again, the next highest is 15. And then the most crashes, KSI crashes of any other stretch of road. And on this map that I included as well, it shows all of the projects where we measure them. And the stretch of road, it's a long one, but it's not the longest and it's comparable to any other stretch of road on that list. So if you're trying to be extremely effective with your dollars and with lowering those numbers, which is what Destination Zero is all about, I would say that that road and getting a roundabout, which we know slows traffic down at those 2 intersections, is the best bang for your buck. I'm going to get this to everybody so you can see this for yourself, but I would like to request that if indeed this is prioritized, I would like to request it to be moved up to number 1. We as a city commission, I brought this up to our city commission and we unanimously voted to support it. And so I would be happy to answer any questions, or I'm asking for your support to move that up in priority.
Any comments?
Certainly. So a couple comments on that front. So yes, we did add also, as you can see, that the first phase partially or fully funded. So that project had been previously funded through design. It sat there for about 8 years. So no, it's not not funded. It has been and was funded previously using MPO funds as well. I think we've had conversations with the department at this point, and I think that the largest constraint, we certainly do not disagree that it is a good project. It's certainly a cost constraint. The cost to implement those is substantial. So doing a cost benefit analysis on that, we fully agree. That's why it is a funded project. It is in our Destination Zero plan. And also we maintain in our mobility efforts. It is an important project. I think the only constraint at this point is certainly cost and reasonable resources to be spent on it. So we certainly agree. I don't think moving it up the list necessarily. All of those, if you read on the first page, continuing completing existing projects is the first priority of the MPO and supports the national goal of accelerating project delivery. That's the first line on the project priority sheet. That is accomplished by where that project currently stands.
I just want to reiterate that we did meet with folks at FDOT in Tallahassee, and that was their suggestion to
Okay.
us.
Certainly. Yeah. And we can work with the department on making that clear, that it is a priority and will remain one. I think it's certainly working through at this point, the cost to accomplish that, as you mentioned, new roundabout and right-of-way needs, that would have to be taken into consideration is ultimately in construction cost. We've gotten some preliminary numbers that are well beyond, I think, what is currently allocated to the MPO's resources. So we'll continue to work.
We'll get some comment from Mr. Secretary.
Sure.
Yes, Mr. Chair. So we did, like Commissioner mentioned, we did meet with the city. And the path that we talked about is, since we already have a design firm on board and the design is progressed a lot, one of the asks from the city is to figure out how to minimize the right-of-way impacts, the property take that's needed to design the roundabout and implement the roundabout. So we're working with the city staff to finalize a concept. And part of that would be to figure out which corner would it be appropriate to shift the roundabout to minimize impacts to other corners. So we're going through multiple iterations to minimize the impacts. And then we're going to define what the construction cost and the property value going to be to implement these roundabouts. And then could be taken into account as part of the MPO process for construction. As far as the design goes, we have the design funding, so we can go forward.
So I do have a question on that. When you look at the corridor from where it starts to where it finishes from Sarasota into Manatee County, is there an area that you would target in that is worse than another area? Or, how does it break down if you have 55 deaths? Were 50 of them in one area of that whole corridor, or was it spread out? Because that to me would be something then you'd target an area that might be sooner than later.
So as it relates to the MPOs, destination zero efforts and our target zero efforts, right? We looked at Manatee and Sarasota County, and our conclusion is Manatee County has the highest number of, I would say, high crash corridors, and particularly US 41. So we're going to be focusing a lot on the Manatee County side as it relates to reducing the fatal and severe injury crashes. And I think Manatee, your MPO is also on the same page on that. Now, as it relates to investments into reducing crashes in Sarasota County, definitely US 41 is one of the corridors. But Mayor, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, if you know, the history shows that we've made significant investments on US 41 to accomplish the vision of city of Sarasota, building multiple roundabouts within the downtown area to connect downtown with Bayfront. And part of the benefit that you get is reducing crashes from implementing these roundabouts, right? So what I'm thinking is the future is going to show that the crashes are going to be going down on US 41 because of those improvements. I'm coming to roundabout way to your question.
Roundabout.
Yeah, roundabout way. Going to your question, where would the investments need to be made? First, we need to identify where those crashes are, right? So I don't have that information in front of me. And then looking at if the crashes are happening at locations, the history shows that they're within the areas where we've already made improvements, and we don't need to revisit them, right? So I cannot answer exactly where they are. We can definitely answer your question.
Yeah, well, I think if you obviously lived here a long time and you drive from the top of that to the bottom of it, you look at it in Sarasota County, there's a lot of medians and different things. When you get into Manatee County, it's a 6-lane highway with no median, and it's a more of a stretch of getting from one place to the other by the Sarasota Bradenton Airport is really where it starts. So, I think there's opportunity, but also what is the biggest bang for the buck when you do those opportunities? Because that's the part I'm looking at, because obviously if you saw 55, why wouldn't that be top without even thinking about it? In reality, but like you said, there's a lot more factors that play into it to get it done. And we know government works at different speeds. Anything?
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that comment. And I believe it's valuable to hone in on actually really where the most dangerous points are. That's very valuable information. In general, I think one of the efforts, the big efforts and the successes of the roundabouts, of course, to more people very quickly. So along that whole corridor, as much as we can slow traffic down, the better off we'll be. And so these two roundabouts just play into that whole succession of roundabouts and slowing people down in that corridor. And that in and of itself, I think is a great value.
Right. Well, I think Sarasota's done such a great job, whether it's city or county, of showing others that roundabouts don't slow traffic flow as much. It brings in a safety aspect. And I know the city of Bradenton, we had done one, probably one of the first ones. And now Manatee County is doing a lot in areas, and it's not making the transportation slower. Sometimes it makes it flow better, even when it's busier. So I think Manatee County hasn't been as aggressive as Sarasota, but I think that could be coming from, especially in the city, and hopefully the county, I think, agrees with that over the years with what they've done. So, so I don't know if, like Ryan had said, is really a point to say, move it to number one. It doesn't change anything. It's in a.
Sure. And also, I mean, you have to look at, we've prioritized these into funding categories. So could move it to the top of that MMEC category if you'd like. But once again, both of these are all competing for different funding mechanisms as well. Also, there are programmatic constraints on the amount of money allowable to be spent on each of these types of projects within the MPO process. So there are a number of things that we could do to address that. Historically, the MMEC averaged the maximum was $3 million per project type. So I certainly don't think from an MPO perspective that would be enough to accomplish right-of-way acquisition and construction. So we'd be able to provide some funding to assist in the process of funding those projects, but certainly not the entirety of future right-of-way acquisition and future construction. So that makes sense.
Thought, comment?
Well, if you could move up, I would appreciate that.
We can certainly do that.
At least ahead of the ringling.
Sure. No, we can, once again, that we can certainly address it within that category.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My only question is that, how are you guys doing in regards to your metrics when you do make an evaluation in regards to a right of way? I know eminent domain process seem to take a little bit longer, but are you guys calculating what the cost would be with an eminent domain process instead of possibly meeting in the middle as far as negotiations go in purchasing those properties?
And that's a, I would lean on the jurisdiction of the DOT as well. The MPO is typically not in the business of going out and purchasing properties, but I know analysis is done in terms of, can we work with them and work on easements rather than acquiring? I know that's partly going through the eminent domain process, as you mentioned, is costly and time consuming. And typically, some cases, right away has been purchased at, market rate versus rather than going and purchasing it through eminent domain. Also conversations I know on the islands of looking at, giving easements to things rather than permanently purchasing property to, for allowable uses, whether that's, sidewalks or bike lanes, whatever it might be. So we have not personally done an analysis at the MPO on that front, but maybe the department has something to add as well.
Well, the only reason why I'm asking is if we do decide we go through that eminent domain process, it could possibly be costing us more due to material costs going up, due to the time it takes to eminent domain something, instead of maybe meeting into the middle if we have to get that right away. Just something possibly to look into, because I'm thinking that over time, I think across the board, this eminent domain process is causing us a lot more. And maybe, it's something to look at. If the value of a property owner wants X amount of dollars, and then we do an evaluation, no, it's worth this much. but then, hey, we might give you a little bit more than that in order to possibly cut some cost. It might be something for us to look into to help us speed up the process and getting these roads built and these intersections improved. Because, the fact of the matter is in Manatee County, we're growing 12,500 people a year. We're going to have an extra 100,000 more people in the next 10 years. If we talk about roads, vehicles on the roads, times that by 2.1 on average, can we maintain that with our current basis of what we have currently today? Because we're not building these roads fast enough for the amount of growth that's happening. And I think this is a statewide issue, but I want to focus here on Manatee because, we're one of the fastest, and Sarasota, one of the fastest growing counties here in the state. And we're not going to continue to stop growing with the beautiful beaches that we have here and the best schools and things of that nature. So it's definitely something that we definitely need to look into moving forward for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we fully agree. We need to be creative as possible in terms of how we work through that. I think right of way and construction always prove to be our limiting factors in terms of how quickly we can progress through the process, the project process.
Mr. Secretary.
Yeah, Mr. Chair. So Commissioner, when we plan a project, right, we actually include the time it takes for the property acquisition and the construction time frame and the design time frame into the whole process, right? But going into estimating what the property cost would be, we assume that, we have to go through the eminent domain process and identify what the cost of acquisition of the property would be when we actually program the project. However, like you said, one of the first thing that we do is we approach the property owner and see if they're going to be a willing seller, right? Which is going to speed up that property acquisition process. But if the property owner is not going to be the willing seller, right, then we'll have to go through the eminent domain process. So all that is taken into account into our timeframes, at least from the department perspective, right? Obviously the local agencies, your counties, there's processes that you guys follow, and the cities, they have their processes to follow. Going to your point of the growth and the amount of infrastructure that's needed to accommodate the growth, I don't think it's about, how fast we can deliver. I think it's more about the resources that we need to deliver, right? I have a interstate master plan identified, prepared. We know exactly what need to be done. We have studies that are looking at, what the additional capacity needed across the Bradenton River, right? I'm sorry, Manatee River, connecting Bradenton and Palmetto. So we know exactly what need to be done. We know exactly when things need to be done based on the growth. It's the resources. It's the funding that's needed. That's why we go through the priority process and defining which one we should tackle first, because it's the not infinite, Commissioner, right? Like to your point, it's the finite resources that we got, and we got to make those decisions. So.
Thank you. All right. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Yeah. We've talked to this, had this discussion quite a bit actually on the island, I think. One of the, looking at easements versus eminent domain, there's just no more land on the island. It is what it is. There's probably not a resort community in the world where you're not going to run into traffic. So it's how can we improve health, safety, and welfare? How can we improve the traffic flow? And in how that affects eminent domain versus easements. But has FDOT run some numbers, looked at the opportunities instead of going after the eminent domain because there's no more land, working with property owners for easements? 2, 3, 4, 5 feet more for a right of way can make all the difference in a sidewalk width, or adding that extra 2 feet to get you an 11-foot traffic lane or bike lane. But yet, if in an easement, one of the advantages I would see for the property owner is they still have the land that they can count in their square footage. There's so much lot coverage that we're allowing on certain properties, depending on the zoning. But this could be a win-win for the property owner who wants to keep the land. and maybe develop it later on. But yet, and they would still have that square foot, you know, a 50 by 100 lot, you take 5-10 feet away, yeah, that's a lot of square feet you're taking away from the possibility of a structure that somebody would like to build on their property. But now if they are forced to sell or eminent domain or whatever, they're not going to be able to. And it's a lose-lose, I think, for communities that are struggling to get permanent residents, to get vacation residents out here or whatever, you know. And it's a real problem. You know, we're losing populations, our permanent populations out there, and this might be a way to do the win-win. And it's kind of also related to other discussions I think that we've all had in the past about sharing infrastructure. You know, there's no, again, you're on the islands, you're not going to be able to afford enough land to take care of the stormwater issues that are out there. So the possibility of looking at sharing infrastructure, such as, you know, we have some condominiums that have some huge areas for stormwater detention ponds that might be an opportunity to go into partnerships with the different individual condominium complexes and sharing the responsibility of maintenance and just taking that or a percentage of that burden away from the condominium associations would be tremendous in solving several problems for the general public and for the individual landowners.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, one more comment and then I'll get off the train, pun intended. The reason, Commissioner, why I brought that I wanted to comment was because of what you just said. There are two corner properties at one of the roundabout intersections that are for sale. One, if not two, that are for sale. And the redesign that came back said that we needed more land, more property for it. And there are two of them that are up for sale right now, which is why I'm trying to push this conversation, because that is a better opportunity for us.
All right, Ryan, any other?
No, I know we've got comment
Yeah,
on this
public
item as well, so we'll withhold motion till now, and then we'll come back and we can answer any questions related to that as well.
All right, obviously, we talked earlier and Ms. Eubanks had read some of the comments that came in by email. We've got several comments coming up. We really, as a board up here, and I think all of us individually, respect all comment. But one of the things that we see work sometimes is everyone has 2 minutes. But if you totally agree with the person that just spoke for the 2 minutes before you, you're saying, I agree with that person or disagree, carries the weight too. You still have your right to your 2 minutes, but you don't have to use it if you just say, I agree with that person before as well. So the first public comment that I have on this is Brooke, I believe it's Langston. All right, please state your name and your county of residence and you'll have 2 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you. I wish I had gone after those gentlemen because then I could have just agreed with them.
Oh.
And they're very much more articulate than I am this morning. My name is Brooke Langston. I live in Sarasota County and I work for the Big Waters Land Trust. And I'm commenting on the Northport Road. For hurricanes Irma and Helene and Ian, I was in the Sarasota County Emergency Operations Center providing logistics to flood victims from Northport and other South County areas. So I understand, I saw and worked firsthand on the issues down there. However, putting a road through specifically voter referendum voted land that is conserved to deal with that and was well planned out and well thought out to deal with flooding issues in a community that should have done better planning ahead of time is not a good solution. Sarasota County voted to protect those lands. We are protecting them and they should stay protected. We shouldn't use those lands to provide a temporary and probably not very efficient fix to flooding in the city of Northport. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so if you filled out a blue comment card, if you want to go up there and whoever wants to be first, so we don't have that same situation where they can say, agree with that person from history, and just state your name and city of residence, and I'll pull out your slip.
I'm John O'Miller, live in Sarasota.
In the 1950s, the Mackel brothers bought 54 square miles of Sarasota County. In 1959, they asked the county for permission to plat 5,000 acres. The county didn't think that was a good idea, so the Mackels said, in effect, fine, we'll solve it on our own. Fast forward 66 years, and Northport wants to explore two devastatingly bad projects outside its municipal boundaries. One involves an illegal crossing of the Mack River, and the other treats SR 72 as some sort of fantastic evacuation route, but getting to 72 is no solution because this two-lane road that floods runs east-west, simply delaying how long it will take to get to a real northbound evacuation route. If FDOT wants to fund projects that would help Northport, they could start by floodproofing all the Northport interstate interchanges, or they could explore connecting Northwest Kane to the interstate. But adding exits doesn't really solve the problem because with 326,000 in Collier, 834,000 in Lee, 206,000 in Charlotte, and 469,000 in Sarasota, I-75 cannot handle all the people that may need to seek shelter from an approaching hurricane. Northport needs to understand that all of Southwest Florida cannot drive its way to safety. Instead, Northport should be planning to solve its problems within its own boundaries, which is exactly what the founders implicitly promised Sarasota County it would do back in 1959. And I've included in the packet I put at your desk of the state rule that prohibits the crossing of the Mayaca. And if you go ahead with this, I just hope the public doesn't find out that you're proposing to spend $500,000 on a prohibited activity. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, please state your name and you have 2 minutes.
My name is Helen Jelks King. I'm the firstborn of Doctors Alan and Mary Jelks, who donated $1 million toward the purchase of the Jelks Preserve by the Jelks Family Foundation, Inc. in 1999. I am also a member of Sarasota County's Environmental Sensitive Lands Oversight Committee, which advises the county commissioners of which environmental lands to purchase. I'm here to talk about the potential of building a bridge over the Maca River and then a road through or above the Jelks Preserve to accommodate growth in the city of Northport. I was instrumental in negotiating this land purchase with John Thaxton as the realtor for Sarasota County. This was the first purchase by Sarasota County of land directly on the Mayaca River to preserve. Since then, the county has made preserving land along the Mayaca River a high priority for the SLOC program. My mother, Mary Jelks, along with Senator Bob Johnson, were able to get the designation of the Mayaca River as a state-listed wild and scenic river in 1985. This enabled restrictions on development along the river in Sarasota County. Any land purchased for preservation should remain in its natural state. Protective land use covenants were formed to protect the Jelks Preserve. You all have a copy of these. They were included in the closing documents when Sarasota County bought this property with the 1-cent sales tax. The yellow highlighted bullet points are relevant to this decision to build a paved road through or above the preserve. Any paved road on this property would be in violation of this covenant. I would recommend, having reviewed your priority list, approval of the 2025 project priorities minus the Toledo Blade and Price Boulevard extensions. Thank you for your consideration.
Good morning, and thank you for your service. My name is Howard Larson Jelks. I'm the third of the 4 children of Doctors Alan and Mary Jelks. I reside in Gainesville, Florida. That's in Alachua County. While my sister Helen speaks to the specific bridge project over the Jelks Preserve, I would like to address the general trend of seeing conservation lands as properties for infrastructure projects. I submit that putting a major road through a conservation area is a reflection of poor planning. Transportation planning is critical to safe movement of citizens and visitors. Planning where housing, industry, and conservation occur is done by other official groups. Conservation lands are frequently associated with wetland features that make other uses untenable. These special properties not only provide habitat for many plants and animals, but they help purify the air we breathe and the water we drink. Conserved lands appear to some people to be underutilized, but those individuals likely don't fully appreciate the services that conserved lands provide. Imagine New York City without Central Park. and know that through time, many proposals for more intense use of that space were brought forth. In Sarasota County, with voting in favor of attacking if the or you roads line, etc. Some of the location value is lost forever. As planning for housing occurs, easements for adequate roadways should be put in place to accommodate eventual traffic. We should not look to conservation lands to solve inadequate housing and transportation planning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Christine Purvis Johnson. For the last 14 years, I've had the privilege of being the president of Big Waters Land Trust, formerly known as Conservation Foundation of the Gulf Coast. Big Waters' mission is to save land, and we've saved over 20,000 acres in our history, making us land conservation experts. And I'm here to tell you how extremely difficult and costly it is to undo land conservation. The City of Northport's request to spend $1 million on feasibility of extending Price Boulevard and Toledo Blade is a waste of your time and taxpayers' money. First, connecting Price Boulevard to River Road would require a bridge over the Mayaca, which you have heard is illegal under state rule in Chapter 62D-15, stating the construction of new bridges is prohibited. Furthermore, Representatives Buchanan and Stubbe just introduced bills into Congress to give Mayaca River federal protection as well. Second, a road through Jelks Preserve would open this organization, the city and county, to possible lawsuits for accepting the property from the Jelks for a specific purpose in exchange for a discount in price and then not honoring that purpose. Third, some of these roads extensions would require breaking conservation easements, which is very hard to do and costly. The courts do not look kindly on municipalities using growth as a reason to break conservation easements. Basically, they have ruled that a lack of planning is not a legal reason to break conservation easements. Fourth and finally, these lands were acquired or conserved with voter-approved and voter-approved bonds, which means that these lands have 2 additional layers of protection to ensure the will of the voters. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Good morning. I'm Sherry Davis. I'm a resident of Sarasota County. I'm also the vice chair of Big Waters Land Trust. The city of Northport's request to spend $1 million on the feasibility of extending Price Boulevard west to River Road and Toledo Blade north to Clark Road across conserved and environmentally sensitive lands is a waste of time and taxpayers' money and is fraught with legal battles and citizen pushback. I think Christine made that abundantly clear in her remarks. Just to remind you that Sarasota citizens voted overwhelmingly twice to tax ourselves to save these lands. To ignore our votes, our voice is the most un-American thing you can do. There's no reason to spend $1 million to assess the environmental impact of these funds because it's abundantly clear what the environmental impacts are. They were acquired through our county's environmentally sensitive land protection program. That's the definition of what these are. They're environmentally sensitive lands. Last year, we found out just how much Floridians love their open space. Hundreds of thousands of people voiced their disapproval to put golf courses, pickleball courts, and hotels in their state parks. What do you think the response would be in our counties to putting roads through environmentally sensitive lands? Please do not waste our precious taxpayer money to study road extensions through protected lands and over the much beloved Mayaca River. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Pat Carlton. I live in Charlotte County. I'm chair of the Land Protection Committee for Big Waters Land Trust, as well as a trustee. And out of respect from everyone's time, I agree with those last 6 comments.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is John Thaxton. I'm Senior Vice President for Gulf Coast Community Foundation. It was difficult for me to determine what to say in 2 minutes on such an important topic. I thought about talking about the wilderness experience that's going to be lost with these 2 roads, maybe mention the interruption of critical wildlife corridors or the unavoidable impacts to threatened and endangered species. But I realized that we can find a consultant that would disagree with those perspectives and deny them as being happening. But the undeniable result that will happen as a result of building these 2 roads is the betrayal of the public's trust. Decades ago, it was very clear that Sarasota and its cities would be paving paradise and putting up parking lots, roads, shopping centers, and housing developments at all corners of this community. Now, with only 10% of our land left to make that decision on, that forecast is regrettably coming true in our lifetime. There will be no large-scale agriculture or open space left in the community, save for that land that was acquired by the government. Motivating this was the environmentally sensitive land movement led by myself, John O'Miller, sitting in the audience today. It was a voter-approved referendum that promised to acquire and preserve in perpetuity these sorts of lands that were being lost by development. And that meant no development, including roads. And there was nothing ambiguous about this problem, about this commitment then, nor is there now. Building new roads to relieve traffic congestion is like curing obesity by loosening your belt buckle. It just doesn't work. I spent 10 years on this board and 40 years in land use planning, and there's no road that you can point to that long-term proved to relieve traffic congestion. I understand as an elected official that sometimes making the right decision and the wrong decision is not as easy as it always appears to be, but this decision is very clear. It is wrong to have these two projects on this long-term transportation list, and the right thing to do is to take them off and approve the remainder of the list. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have no other comment cards. And obviously, we said earlier that all of the emails were read into the record and they're available. And I'd like to thank the audience and all the commenters on being kind and gentle when things are passionate. Sometimes things don't go, but it's very important for everyone to hear that and be good stewards of all of our community and obviously our efforts. So Ryan, you're up.
I don't have a whole lot to add. I mean, you heard their comments as well. I think I will add one stipulation. You know, these are only added in this list for illustrative purposes. They are in the jurisdictional needs list, meaning that there was no funding identified for these two projects in our 2045 long-range plan. That being said, I open it up to the board for any discussion about potential amendments or additions to this list prior to a motion for adoption.
All right. Mr. Hutchinson, do you have anything particular?
No, I think you've heard from the public, and you've heard, now it's up to the board to take action to, there are many, it's important that we adopt priorities. So I wouldn't recommend deferring this action in any way, shape, or form. But, the list itself and what goes on it is up to the board.
All right. So Commissioner Cruz.
I mean, this isn't our county. So, I mean, I'd like to hear from, so like, we vote for Manatee County on what we want to put on there. I can't speak to why this was put on the list. I don't know why it was put on the list. Like, at no point in time would Manatee County say, let's put a road through Duet Preserve. There's a reason it's a preserve, and we want to keep it as a preserve. We're trying to buy more preserves, not destroy the ones we already have. But I can't speak to it. I can't pretend to be an expert on traffic patterns in another county. So I honestly like to hear, because I'm going to defer to other counties, other municipalities on their request, just like I'm going to ask them to honor our request. That's what our board does.
Well,
yes, sir.
These projects or the studies were requested by the city of Northport, not Sarasota County, even though the locations of the studies would entail the jurisdiction of Sarasota County. It's not on our long-range transportation plan cost feasible list or anywhere in the long-range transportation plan. And one of the requirements that before we would actually support getting funding to do something like this would be consistency with the necessary, appropriate, relevant, comprehensive plans.
Sure, but I'd still like to hear, look, let's be honest, we've all been here. I can find someone to give me a report on anything. I promise you'll find a consistency at the end of the day. And once a road's in there, I promise you'll find some developers that say you might as well slap a Wawa on there because there's a road through there. And what if someone runs out of gas? Next thing you know, you don't have a conservation area anymore. So, but again, I'm going to defer to whether it's the city or the county, I don't care, because it's their list, not my list. I personally would never put this on Manatee County's list, but maybe there's a reason.
Thank you, Chair. I guess you all should hear from the city of Northport since they were our requests.
unless you live in the city, it's very hard to imagine or experience that there is no way out of the city heading north or south, for that matter, without going into another county. We are landlocked to the north, east, and west by conservation land. It's a huge issue. It's a danger for the city of Northport. And it's not so much for traffic relief, although it would be wonderful to have an alternative to 75. And yes, I know there's 41, but when there's an issue on 75, 41 is impassable. So it's very, very hard to imagine what that is like if you're trying to escape or get out of the city of Northport and there's no way out. So it's for evacuation, it's to provide relief from 75 and 41, which are the only alternatives. I'm delighted that there's so much interest in the city of Northport at this commission meeting. It is an unusual occurrence that that happens. I would be delighted to hear from folks on how we might alleviate Northport's issue rather than telling us what we shouldn't or can't do. What are your thoughts on what we might do to solve that issue and to blame or put responsibility on the current administration for planning that didn't happen 65 years ago is respectfully unfair. And folks in Northport, myself included, have a huge commitment to conservation land and open space. 34% of our land mass is currently conserved, park, or open space. So City of Northport has a huge commitment and values that kind of thing. But we have a huge issue in our city that we are landlocked by conservation land, and there is no way out except 75.
Okay, Commissioner Aaron Koch and then Mayor.
Yes, thank you so much. I agree with Commissioner Cruz that, conservation land is exactly conservation land. I think we've all entered into that. And I know we have in the city of Sarasota, and I would not be happy knowing that in 20 years, for whatever reason, the nature park at Bobby Jones, which is supposed to be a perpetual conservation easement, is now all of a sudden needed for a road to go through the middle of it for whatever reason. We entered into that agreement not lightly. Our citizens supported it broadly. It was one of the very few issues, as you know, that was not contested. Nobody spoke out against it. So when you enter into those agreements and you do it, again, not lightly, they should be honored for perpetuity, which is what it's supposed to be. I don't understand the complexities with the need for a new roadway and an evacuation route well enough to speak to that other side of it. And I obviously don't know of any other solutions, but just speaking from the point of view of conservation land and the Jelks family, highly respected, very active in our community. Thank you for your work. Thank you for continuing to be involved as well. There must be another way out of this.
Mayor and then Commissioner.
My biggest question is, I mean, some legal issues have been identified, so I know we can spend money on studies all day, but at the end of the day, if the result is we can't build on the land anyway, then I don't understand why we would try to allocate the money to do that. So, yeah, I have some concerns with the legality.
Commissioner Bishop.
Thank you. If if I could ask our staff, how can this be put, what is the basis for putting something on the long-range transportation plan? And have we looked at all the criteria that should exist before this project even moves forward?
I can answer that as well. It's not in the long range transportation plan, hence the location of the project on the list. It's identified as a jurisdictional need. I can read the definition. These represent all types of projects and were ranked using MPO scoring criteria. Funding consideration will be determined by resource availability, project type. These projects are listed for illustrative purposes, meaning they have not been identified in the MPO's long range transportation plan.
Then if I could add to
Sure.
what you've just read, I would hope that staff would clearly see that this is conservation property.
Sure.
You know, we don't come to terms with funding conservation properties without a lot of work at the local level. And I would hate to think that because there might have been a lack of forethought in proper land use planning to create a population of residential units, that someone did not provide adequate transportation to get in and out of, that someone else, that being the conservation property itself, has to suffer. This to me is, you know, and I'm sure that this didn't happen with the current Northport Commission. This probably happened 25 years ago with some half-baked ideas of how many houses can we jam in here to make a lot of money. But that does not mean you get to come down the road 25 years later and take away what little conservation property is left in a community. So I would, I fought this battle in Northern Virginia with Disney, who wanted to tell Paul Mellon that he could have his farm, 2,000 acres, ripped away because they wanted to put a theme park going back into the old days on it. And thank God Mr. Mellon had enough money to tell you, we're not going to be that irresponsible. And I'm not sure this belongs in front of us right now, but I can tell you that if it does belong before us, it would be irresponsible for us to do anything to damage conservation property.
Yeah, and I think we wholeheartedly agree. And I think ultimately the MPO staff and our organization's role is to accept applications from the member jurisdictions, and this board ultimately sets the priorities therefore. So I would strongly encourage that discussion and ultimately a decision from the board to either keep or withhold the projects from the list.
Commissioner Smith and then Council Member Coe.
Okay. Oh, well, thank you, Chair. This is a conundrum. Obviously, basically, we have a city that's landlocked by conservation. However, it is what it is. It's landlocked by conservation, and it's what the voters and the taxpayers paid for, and the Jux family generously made available to Sarasota County. I guess I would like to suggest that instead of spending $1 million on environmental impact, that perhaps $1 million should be spent on having to solve the problem. And that is, if it's a widening or of I-75, if it's something to do with 41, focus on the problem within the constraints that were given. And those constraints are the conservation areas that are surrounding Northport, and not look for what appears to be an easy way out, which is through Paradise. So my suggestion would be for us to explore spending that $1 million on an answer for Northport and not taking away the conservation lands. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel a bit like I'm going into somebody else's sandbox, so but I would have a very hard time supporting this because as a realtor, I've dealt with properties that had conservation easements. I mean, what I'm being given says that there's a covenant on that. I feel like you would be approving something that you're going to be sued over. You're going to spend a lot of money in litigation. I would rather see that money go towards something that's more viable. But there again, you know, I'm not in Northport. I don't know what all went into this, but just from this little bit of knowledge, I just think that removing a covenant and conservation properties, properties I dealt with, I wasn't even supposed to walk on them. So, you know.
Thank you. And I think that obviously when information comes forward and sometimes you learn from it, and we've all been in situations where, you know, we didn't cause it 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, but we've got to deal with it now. So, you know, looking at benefit of the doubt for Northport, I like the reaction of Commissioner Langdon. You know, yeah, we've got to deal with this. We've got to try to figure out for safety, but what can we do? We'd like to get together and see what other alternatives are out there, because like everyone said, this is kind of hard to support when it's not our sandbox or backyard, or so we don't know all the history, but we all have history of something in our own communities that we're dealing with. And I just think that, you know, it is a conundrum, and maybe by bringing this up, Northport then also will have another opportunity to say, okay, what are alternatives? What can make a win-win? So, you know, I don't know if there has to be a motion to not accept that part of it, but we need to accept the rest of it. Is that something that we need, Mr. Hutchinson?
Yes.
That you could adopt a motion to adopt the list excluding those two proposed studies. And then I think what staff is looking to do going forward is, you know, our LRTP should set the tone. We don't want to ever eliminate new ideas, though, and thinking outside the box, especially in transportation. You know, we heard about the potential for, you know, vertical air travel in the future. You know, I wanted a flying car when I was a kid, and they've never made them yet, but they might. So we want to allow for new ideas to get onto the priority list and get looked at as, you know, future rail perhaps. But in the meantime, we would like to, you know, we'll look at ways to limit the priority list, which is way too long. We can never afford to fund all of these priorities anyway. Even studies, we have lots of studies that are funded, and then we can't afford to do the project. So that would be, I think, a viable solution for today. And we've worked with the city of Northport staff and the commission there to try to look at what other alternatives might help mobility within the city and within the region.
Because I think all of us at some point are going to have something like this to bring up, and we want to get it on the list if we can. But others, usually, as Commissioner Cruz said, we try to listen to the other and go with what they want in certain times. I'm going to ask Commissioner Langdon. I know this is a conundrum for you more than anybody. You're here by yourself today. Unfortunately, I think Vice Mayor Hemrich was coming, but traffic or something must have turned him around.
Actually, he's ill.
Oh, he's ill? Okay. All right. So did you have any final comments before we ask for a motion?
No, just that I've certainly heard the lack of support for both of these projects. It sounds like it's the will of the board. So I certainly won't vote to remove them, but I understand the conundrum. And I do respect conservation land. However, I think there are ways of traversing conservation land that minimizes environmental impact, but I don't sense any appetite today to explore those.
Thank you. So the chair will entertain a motion.
I have a
Chair?
motion,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Can I make a motion?
Yes, yes.
I would move approval with two changes, two amendments. One is that we remove the Northport projects, and the other one is that we move the roundabout at Myrtle and MLK up as high as we can on that priority list.
Okay.
I will second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second by Commissioner Bishop. Further discussion? Yes, ma'am.
Is this the only chance to address the first part as far as, will there be another time, if we leave this on the list, will there be another time to address the concerns or stop it?
Well, there's always more chances of that a project would get stopped. I mean, one of the things that Federal Highway and FDOT want is a regionally supported list of priority projects, first of all. And when projects that have a lot of controversy involved, they tend to back away from some of those projects, you know, and not want to, you know, that's a chance to stop it or stop something. But but as far as this year's list, no, once this is adopted, then this is this year's priority list. It can be amended by the board. We've done amendments to add specific projects over the years, and priorities can be expressed, you know, as a high priority separate from this list. The diverging diamond at University Parkway comes to mind, which, you know, hadn't been on anyone's radar really, but because we were going to do yet another study within an area. And when the State Secretary of Transportation and Representative Stubbe said, would you rather have a study or an interchange? You know, we're here, we do studies in order to get projects. So if you start a study, you should be prepared to follow through and support the project that might come out of it. Now, these studies are likely to identify all of the problems that you heard about today, frankly.
Okay, and then also with the reprioritization, what are we leapfrogging? I don't know what projects are ahead of it.
And I would reiterate a clarification on that as well. The order on those is simply by the FPID number.
Okay.
So they're in numerical order. So once again, not really in terms of 1, 2, 3 in that rank, hence why there's no longer a score associated with them, because once they are in the pipeline, we are ensuring if it makes it better from a visual perspective, we're happy to accommodate that as well. But currently they're in FPID or project number based on the assign from DOT.
Yeah, yes, please. Only because it was
Sure.
the request of FDOT when we were in Tallahassee to put it first.
Gotcha.
We'll move up that 3 to 1.
Yes, please.
And we either got to say 3 to 1 or possibly, because I think you would possibly move it.
I didn't understand the nuance of that listing, but
Correct.
you know, it was the request, and if we could, yes, I would like to move it to 1. And it's clearly not the top of it, but if we could put it first on the list, thank you.
All right. So is that okay with the seconder?
Yes.
Yep,
it is.
okay. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
I'd like to, I support the motion, but I'd also like to find a solution for Northport. And maybe this board at a future time could consider funding for a study to alleviate the traffic problems in Northport for evacuation reasons.
Yeah, and I think the priority part of things is that's for Northport to bring back to us at the right time. But I agree with you from a standpoint of, you know, we all have issues that we're dealing with. And whether it's roads or wastewater or other things that we didn't cause, we would, you know, like people to come to us sometimes and say, we don't want this. Well, what do you want then? Or what can you help with? So hopefully Northport has heard that, I think, as Commissioner Langdon said, and now, and hopefully the audience has heard it, and the people watching on TV, if there's other solutions, we're all ears on those things, and I think that can help. All right, so we have a motion and a second, and we would like to go ahead and all approving it, to say aye.
Aye.
Is there any opposed?
Opposed for reasons stated.
Yes, ma'am. So carries whatever the number is to 1. Thank you. All right, moving forward. Next, we have item 8C, performance measures update. Good morning, good afternoon.
Good morning. I am Varshini Renikunta, multimodal planner with the Sarasota Manatee MPO. And today I'm going to give you an update on performance measures 2 and 3, which focuses on transportation infrastructure condition and systems performance. So the federal transportation law requires state DOTs, MPOs, and TPOs to implement transportation performance management framework. So this framework is asked to implement to make policy decisions and investments in a strategic approach. So these performance management are set based on previous performance levels and forecasted conditions of transportation infrastructure. So the framework has 3 performance measures, which is performance 1, highway safety, performance 2 is bridge and pavement conditions, and 3 is system performance and freight movement. And then we have transit asset management, which is mostly monitored and maintained by our transit agencies. And then we have transit safety, which is kind of tied with performance 1, highway safety. So the performance 1 was brought to the board in January for your approval and adoption. And now we have updates to PM2 and PM3 for your approval and adoption. So for target setting options, MPOs and TPOs get 2 options, which is either adopting the targets that are established by DOT or establishing our own targets. So historically, Sarasota Manatee MPO has always adopted the targets that were established by FDOT for PM2 and PM3. And this time around, we are also planning to do the same, like supporting the targets that are already established. So these PM2 and PM3 assess the condition of transportation infrastructure and freight movement on national highway system. So in our region, NHS includes Interstate 75, 275, US 41, 301, State Road 64, State Road 70, and a few other major roadways. And most of these roadways are maintained and monitored by the district. So that's one of the reasons why the MPO supports the state targets instead of establishing our own targets. So PM2. So this one measures or it assesses the conditions of bridge and pavement based on the certain measures, which is the percent of pavement that is on interstate system, which is in good and poor condition, and the percent of pavement that is on non-interstate system, which is in good and poor condition. So for all the infrastructure that is in good condition, there's no further investments that is suggested. And for those in poor condition, there's a major suggestion of investing more funds. So with poor condition, it doesn't mean that the pavement or the bridges are unsafe to use. It rather means that there's need for more investments in near future. So similar with bridge performance measure, it measures the percent of NHS bridges by deck area that are in good and poor condition. So the table on the right is the existing statewide condition, and the table on the left outlines 23 and 25 targets. So before getting into the numbers and the matrices, I'll provide a brief history of why we are presenting this to you today. So FDOT establishes its targets for performance measure 2 and 3 once every 2 year and 4 year. So these 23 target and 2025 targets were established in late 2022, and it was brought to the board in early 2023 for your adoption. So once these targets are set, FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, and FTA, Federal Transit Admin, they kind of assess the FDOT's targets to kind of measure their performance. And when they recently assessed the FDOT's 23 and 25 targets, they have realized that that our infrastructure is performing way better than it was projected to perform. So FDOT decided to update their 2025 targets to be more stringent and realistic to the current conditions of the infrastructure. So the table on the right is the existing statewide conditions of bridges and pavements. So the infrastructure in poor conditions for bridges has almost been less than 1%. So the 2025 target previously for bridges in poor condition was 10%. So for their updated 25 target, now they have pushed it to being 5%. And yeah, that's for bridges and pavement. And the performance 3 is systems performance, which measures the reliability of passenger and freight movement on NHs based on 3 measures, which is interstate reliability, non-interstate reliability, and truck reliability. So reliability in general terms is basically a measure of travel time in different time of the day or different days. So say if you're getting from point A to point B in 15 minutes in one day, if it's taking you about the same time at any given day or at any given time of the day, that infrastructure is said to be highly reliable. So if it takes you a different travel time regarding any situation, then it is said to be lower reliable. So these reliability is measured based on interstate reliability and non-interstate reliability. So the update to these targets is both interstate and non-interstate reliability. So it was 75% earlier. It was 70% earlier, and now they've pushed it to 75% because our interstate infrastructure has been performing above 80% in last few years. So this is a matrix of the adopted 2025 targets for the 3 measures and the updated targets for 2025. So the first one is PM2, percent of NHS bridges that are in poor condition. The previous adopted target was less than 10%, and now the updated target is less than 5%. And for the person miles traveled on interstate reliability was earlier 70%, and now they've pushed it up to 75%. The last one is PM3% miles traveled on non-interstate NHS. So it was 50% earlier, and now they've bumped it to 60%. And that concludes my presentation, and I can take it.
Any questions? So the chair will entertain a motion for endorsement of the performance measures.
I just had one.
Okay.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. I have a question about the percentage of bridges being at 5%. We have the target, the Vision Zero, where we accept no fatalities. Why do we accept 5% for bridges being in poor condition? I wouldn't want to be on that bridge.
So, I mean, of course, the condition doesn't mean that it is unsafe to drive. So it depends on the age of construction or how long the bridge has been there for. So say DeSoto Bridge, like it's still safe to drive. I take DeSoto Bridge every day, but then that bridge needs more investment in near future. So that would be a bridge in poor condition.
Okay.
So all the interstates and all the bridges are safe to drive, even if they're poor condition, but then it just means we need more investment focused.
Thank you.
All right. So chair will entertain a motion for endorsement.
I would move approval.
Okay. Second. All right. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye. All right. Approves unanimously. Thank you.
Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you. Moving forward with the FDOT MPO Joint Annual Certification Report.
Chair, Board, my name is Wayne Gaither, Florida Department of Transportation, District 1. We're here to talk a little bit about the Joint Certification Report. This is a report that we do each year as an annual basis, basically to take a look at the MPO staff and how they're doing in compliance with state and federal regulations. More of the housekeeping side of what gets done, invoices, tip documentation, things of that nature. And I am happy to say they have done another excellent job this year. They've been able to maintain, based on the concurrency for their reports, a low risk, basically meaning that they're doing the things they're supposed to be doing in a timely fashion and as complete as can be possible during that time frame.
Any questions?
Mr. Brown, I would just add one note. Yeah, this is a process that we undertake with the state and FDOT on an annual basis. And as Dave mentioned earlier, we will be working with Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration for our every 4-year certification here in July. As Dave mentioned, the dates for that are tentatively the 16th and 17th. And a lot of the work that we do with the state goes into that effort as well. So we look forward to your participation in that effort as well. That's all we have on that.
Questions? Chair will entertain a motion to authorize the chair to execute required certification document.
So moved.
Second.
All right. Thank you. Any other discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Approved unanimously. Thank you. All right. Next, might as well stay up there, Ryan. You're up.
Yeah, I'll move along quicker for you now. I know we're getting closer to lunch here, but I wanted to bring back the Transportation Regional Incentive Program list. As Pam mentioned earlier, applications were due. I think they're due today. This was done through our project priority process. We received a number of applications as well as updated priorities for this list. As you know, we have joint lists with Polk and Charlotte County. We operate on kind of a loose agreement of alternating priorities dependent on funding. As you can see, the lists are provided for your review. These are not requiring action today. They'll be back in May for action as we're still awaiting Polk TPO's trip priorities for 2025. I will reiterate that the requests on here in some cases are fairly extensive. We'll remind there's only about $7 or $8 million a year annually of trip funds provided to the district. So some of these requests likely would not be fully accommodated or dealt with using trip funds. You know, requests in the $25-30 million range are certainly not going to be accomplished solely using trip funds. However, I do know the importance of some of these projects to be maintained on local and regional lists. So with that, I'll take any questions on the applications submitted by you all, and the orders of this list. Will certainly work closely with Charlotte and Polk County as we work for finalizing these prioritized lists for you.
Right, and this is just information only. So any
Correct.
questions on this? Hearing none, we'll move forward to the MPO presentation, Ed Smith Planning Study.
Sure.
We've got Kimley Horn and Associates.
Yep, and I will open up here for Ryan, as you know, and worked closely with in the city of Bradenton. We did a LECOM study over the last several years. We have now successfully kicked off our Ed Smith planning study as well down in the city of Sarasota. And with us here today is Ryan Suarez with Kimley Horn to give us an update of their efforts thus far. So I'll hand it over to Ryan.
Thank you. Welcome.
Okay, thank you very much, Ryan. As he indicated, Ryan Suarez with Kimley Horn and Associates. I was told to spend 5 minutes before today's meeting, but now I think I got to be a little bit more concise. So I will be as concise but thorough as possible for the group here. As Ryan indicated, we've kicked off this study. This is one of 3 baseball stadium studies identified in the prior long-range transportation plan. The focus being here multimodal facilities, safety, access, game day, and non-game day events. Important here is the interaction between the neighborhoods, and I'll speak to that in just a second. Results, we do want to package our improvements into short, mid, and long-term multimodal transportation improvements so we can include them into the long-range transportation plan, which is in the works as we speak. This is the study area that you see here. On the west, Washington Boulevard 301, on the east, Beneva, to the north, 17th, and on the south is Fruitville. Question here is, hey, if we're just focused on game day traffic and game day operation, why are we looking at this larger study area? The neighborhoods that are in and around Ed Smith do stand to benefit and gain from the transportation improvements that we're going to identify as part of this project. Points of interest are noted on this map as well. We have conducted some initial desktop review, including crash data and the identification of the facilities that are out there on the ground. Today, you'll see the crash map here, which basically it's a heat map of where we see the most crashes along with the level of severity for some of these, which includes serious injury and fatality. You see a lot of activity on Fruitville Road and also on 301. What's not noted here is a recent fatality crash. It was actually 2 on 301 and 7th, I believe, but it is something we're going to talk to the Park East neighborhood about. Park East neighborhood is a large neighborhood located in the southwest corner of our study area. So we do acknowledge that, and that's important, and that's on our list to review. Again, I noticed the desktop review. I'll just skip through that one. One important thing, desktop plus field work is very important. One thing is to look at maps and the information that we see through the data resource that we have. Another thing is to actually be out there on the ground and see the conditions in the field. We do have bike audit, walk audit activities as well, so that we can see where the obstacles are. what are the difficulties that might exist out there for vehicles, for pedestrians, and for cyclists in the field. One important, we're just fresh off of spring training. We were out there for 2 games to observe the activity and the traffic conditions and the pedestrian movements. During the game day, this graphic in the red shows some of the traffic cues that we saw, red being on the access to the game and yellow being on the egress out of the game, so after the games. We did pick what we thought were A games, a Yankees game on a Thursday evening recently. It was a sold-out game. The parking lots were full. And we also picked a weekend game, a Saturday game with the Rays. So this is a compilation. We do have some traffic counts as well that we're going to compare to our visual observations while being on the ground and put that all together in the analytics that get us to some improvements. And I know I'm speaking rather quickly here, so if we got questions, maybe we talk after or maybe after I finish here. Project schedule is noted here. As you can see, we've broken this out into 3 phases overall with multiple tasks in each phase. The important piece is at the bottom. We do want to align with development of the long-range transportation plan. So we'll have some initial recommendations early summer, again, with more specific recommendations towards the fall. I think this is the most important piece. We're going to disseminate this. This is the way we want to collect information at this point, at least via the web. It's an interactive map. Folks can pick little icons that are bicycles, peds, or other types of improvements and drag and drop them onto a map and provide their notes on where they see problems or where they see we need to take a harder look or that improvements might be needed. So we'll share this URL along with the QR code with this group. We have shared it with others so we can disseminate it and collect public feedback by way of that tool. And I think that's about it. Hopefully I kept to the 3 minutes I was given. I'll entertain any questions from this board.
Questions? Yes, ma'am.
I just have one question on that map that you gave before about the all crashes with severity and then the bike pedestrian crashes.
Yes.
It looked to me when I was looking over this earlier that there's a lot of overlap between that. Is that, am I interpreting that correctly, that the crashes with severity are bike pedestrians, a good portion of those, or do we have any numbers?
We've got separate maps. For the purposes of this presentation, we just tried to give you just one condensed map, but we do have a separate map with all crashes, a map with just the severity, and then just something separate with the bicycle and pedestrian crashes. I can speak to some of the bicycle and pedestrian.
We do have that. Well, I have it in my
Oh,
backup
the full,
materials,
okay.
the bike pedestrian, and they correlated to the severity one, which is why I was concerned about, you know, any crashes that severe is awful. But if it's very specifically bike pedestrian, then we, as a city, should know that we need to be addressing that along 301. And I think it's Beneva and Kettle's the other one.
There's a grouping of activity here by, I think this is Lime, and on Fruitville that seem to have a lot of severe bike ped crashes as well. And you can see all the, there's several that exist on 301 as well. So there is some correlation between severity and then the overall kind of crash heat map that we show here.
Okay, maybe we can talk.
Sure. I think that'd be great.
Anything else? All right. Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Moving on to the MPO presentation of 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan.
Thank you. And I'll just provide a brief introduction as well. With me today is Wally Blaine with Benish and Franco Saraceno with Kittleson Associates to give you an update quickly on our long-range transportation plan and the ongoing schedule. With us today is Wally here to talk a little bit about our goals, objectives, policies, and review some of the early stages of the long-range plan, as well as our revenue forecasting and getting into our, the fun part, cost feasibility and adding new projects to our long-range plan. So with that being said, I'll hand it over to Wally to get started.
Thanks, Ryan. Mr. Chairman, board members, Wally Blaine with Benish. Happy to be here this morning. We'll walk through this real quickly. The only hard thing about making a last minute presentation even shorter is having an exciting topic to discuss. So the couple of the key takeaways as we've developed the long-range transportation plan goals and objectives for the 2050 plan. The most important thing to keep in mind throughout this is we're not starting over. We're working on your current long-range transportation plan that goes through the year 2045, and we're expanding that now to the new horizon of 2050, taking into consideration updated existing conditions, updated federal guidance, updated coordination with the state and what that means. So one of the key takeaways here is your goals for the 2050 plan are consistent with the goals from your 2045 plan. We did do some outreach to the public. We coordinated that with the vision. You've heard presentations about the vision that was developed for creating a balanced future and a balanced growth moving forward. And those goals still align with your established vision for 2050. Also, we did a review of current federal and state regulations and requirements, and that we're consistent moving forward with those, and that the preferred types of projects that we heard from the public also align with the goals and objectives that were heard from. So we did do a review of your current objectives and goals. We went out to the public and discussed those and the current federal requirements. A key takeaway here, a survey that was done that ran from, I believe it was November to early February, got input from about 700 respondents on that. The top three areas that we came away from a goals perspective and ranking those was safety and security, infrastructure and resiliency, and environment. So you also heard some comments today about how passionate your community is about conservation. So those were the key goals that came away from that outreach. We also had an in-person public forum. It was more of a targeted audience that was part of that group. We did some interactive questions and polling with them as well. There was some variation in the responses on that, but safety and security also came out as the top goal from that group. Also the most consistent thing throughout, but the one that it was the most variation that we heard, it was the lowest ranked from the forum group, but in the mid range from the public was technology and autonomy. So certainly a lot of uncertainty when we think about what the future could look like. A good editorial about what our communities have thought about the future in the past with the Jetsons, Back to the Future, and Wally. I like him. When we did the federal requirements review, in the same way that your 2045 plan will be somewhat consistent moving forward from 2050, a lot of the federal guidance has been consistent. The FDOT and Federal Highway usually produce a great framework of our federal requirements to follow. There wasn't new specific guidance that came out for the 2045 plan, are different from the 2050 plan. So we're still moving forward with those same long-range planning factors and requirements. There have, however, been several executive orders that have come out since the first of the year that impact and affect the way that the MPO addresses some of the planning requirements. So we've addressed that, and that's what I'll spend the next little bit going over. So your first goal is economy. These are in alphabetical order, so they're not intended to imply any order. What we did is consolidate the goal statements that were there before for all of these goals, put them into a condensed sentence framework to make them more digestible. I won't spend time going forward. I believe these are in your packet as well for consumption. The key takeaway here for economy is that we are not suggesting any changes from your goals or objectives from the 2045 plan. Under environment, we do have one change that we're changing as far as the objective statements and adding in the phrase low impact development. That replaces a word that was there as far as green infrastructure before. So we're changing the language on that. The next is livability. Again, condensing down that goal statement from the objectives. We're saying that the last one there, ensure economic opportunity, whereas before that addressed some equitable and equality language. Under infrastructure, we're not proposing any changes to your goals and objectives. Mobility is the same. Again, no changes are being suggested there. Project delivery is about some of the conversation you've had. How do we get the plan into implementation and move it forward in project delivery? Again, no suggested changes there. And then on safety, we're adding one objective to the last year. It's planned for efficient evacuations and safe returns. And a lot of this came out of discussions with staff. A lot of the safety conversation has been about fatalities, serious injuries on our road, but we also recognize what the impact has been over the last several years with emergency evacuation and making sure that we have safe and efficient movement. And then technology, no changes on that. To wrap up, we also did, as part of the survey and as part of the public forum, we asked questions about the types of projects where people would want to see investments made. And you can see how these are ranked. This was, for the survey, somewhat of an open-ended question. So these categories we've tried to collapse down to reduce the number of responses on there. But certainly those that received more than 50% support from everyone participating. And again, we had over 700 people respond on that survey. You see traffic flow and safety, was the highest. Safe walking and intersections were the top three. So again, a lot of your conversation has been consistent with what we heard from the public about what they would like to see future transportation investments made. The pie chart on the right is the responses from the public forum. So a little bit of a variety there, but again, a more focused audience as opposed to the general public in response. So what's next? Taking these goals and objectives, we want to apply our data measures to that and how we evaluate projects for the advancement into the long-range transportation plan. And I believe Franco comes up next to talk to you about some of the revenues that are available for doing projects, making projects happen. You've heard already today about the next forum event that is April 28th at the State College of Florida, and then aligning the available funding with the goals that we've talked about. So, Mr. Chairman, I know that was
quick, but
Well,
we
it was
appreciate
quick.
it. Any questions? All right, appreciate it, Wally. Thank you. And Bronco's up next with the 2050 Long Range Transportation Plan Cost Feasible Plan Development. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning or good afternoon.
Still
Again,
morning.
I'll try to be brief.
2 minutes.
Franco Saraceno with Kittleson and Associates. As we all know, adopting the Long Range Transportation Plan, updating it once every 5 years is a federal requirement. One of the fundamental parts of that requirement is that we adopt a demonstrably cost feasible plan. What that means, or how we do that, is we organize the plan into 5 and 10-year time bands, forecast revenues for those time bands, and then compare revenues to costs, but to prioritize projects, ensuring that costs do not exceed revenue in every one of those periods. How we get there is obviously we start with forecasting revenues. We then prioritize our projects. As we all know, we can't afford all of the needs or desired improvements to the transportation system. Project cost estimates, of course, we subtract the costs that have already been incurred or for pre-construction phases that have been completed. And then we simply allocate the funding to the prioritized list of projects in order to create that cost feasible plan. One exception to the cost feasibility requirement is that we can use something called boxed funds. What that means is that we can set aside portions of revenues and include a list of candidate projects, usually programmatically, active transportation, congestion management, or what have you, which gives us the flexibility to advance projects on those lists more flexibly in the future. In this plan update, given that we have less revenue than in the last plan update, we're going to be taking a more nuanced approach to box funds, a little bit more rigorous approach, limiting the length of those lists and prioritizing those lists. So in terms of the revenue sources, we obviously have state federal revenues, and those projections are provided to the MPO by FDOT. And I'll share those with you in a moment. And then local revenue sources. Those are estimates that we have put together. They include state distributed fuel taxes, which are the constitutional and county fuel taxes that go to every county. Local option fuel taxes, there are 3 for a total of 12 cents, both of which are in place for Sarasota and Manatee counties. The infrastructure surtax, as well as impact and mobility fees. For the infrastructure surtax, I believe for Sarasota County, it expires in 2039, Manatee in 2031. For the purpose of the LRTP, we did assume that those surtaxes would be extended to 2050 based on the history of past extensions. And then, of course, the mobility and impact fees reflect the latest fee schedules. And for example, for Manatee County, we assumed the escalated fee schedule for 2028 to apply to future years all the way to 2050. So I'll just walk you through a brief summary of the revenues. You should have the detailed revenue estimates by period in your packets. For Manatee County, the largest revenue source is that sales surtax. Again, assuming that it is extended to 2050 at $1.9 billion. One caveat is for all of these revenues, they're gross estimates of revenue. So this assumes all of the revenue that will come in. We recognize that for the sales surtax, 15% of those revenues by the current county budget are allocated to non-transportation infrastructure. Those will come off the top. The other caveat is that for the fuel taxes, typically those are reserved for operating and maintenance expenses, so they won't be available. The majority of them won't be available for capital improvements in the LRTP, but these are just gross estimates of those revenues. For Sarasota County, again, the largest source is that sales surtax. The difference between Sarasota and Manatee being that a much larger portion of the Sarasota County surtax is dedicated to non-transportation expenses. 50% goes to the school board. A portion of the rest goes to other types of infrastructure. So we assume 35% of it will be available for capital improvements in the transportation plan. And finally, state and federal. The largest allocation of state and federal funds, of course, is the strategic intermodal system at $1 billion. It takes up about half of the funding. The rest is distributed across the other funding sources. Relative to the 2045 update 5 years ago, we have a lot less funding. These revenues are much lower, approximately half of what they were in the 2045. And it varies by program. Some are flat, others are fairly dramatically lower than in 2045. When we compare the county, the local revenues and state federal, this is the bar chart. Honestly, I've never seen the bar chart look like this. It's kind of upside down, which means we're going to be much more reliant on local funds to fund transportation improvements in our cost feasible plan. As I mentioned, the state federal forecasts are about 50% of what they were in the 2045. And by the way, a big portion of that, around $1 billion, reflects strategic intermodal system improvements that were in the plan in the 2045, but now it's a different plan. So in other words, the SIS money, we aren't actually revenue forecasts. They're a reflection of the costs of the cost feasible plan for the SIS. So 50% of those state federal funds are dedicated to the SIS. And again, about 50% of the local revenues will go towards debt service, other infrastructure, and operating and maintenance expenses. So the next steps, now that we have our revenues, we're currently in the process of prioritizing projects, and we'll be embarking on the cost feasible plan development here in the next couple of weeks for an adoption later this fall. Happy to take any questions.
Mr. Secretary, did you have some comments or did you have anything? I didn't know.
No, Mr. Chair. I was
Perfect.
just looking at you. That's it.
I just had a question.
Okay, yes, sir.
I'm looking at the revenues. Have we taken into account what we're going to be doing in the future in regards to EV? I have a feeling that, in neighborhoods today, we're seeing more and more EVs. What are we doing to prepare for that? Because if that's the case, we're going to lose a lot of revenue in regards to our fuel tax. And so what are the measures, maybe maybe you don't know, in order to make up for that?
Well, as far as I know, there are no dedicated funding sources for EV infrastructure. There are discretionary programs in the most recent federal bill for that type of infrastructure. In terms of the loss of gas tax revenues, that is reflected in our estimates. We use, I believe, a factor of 1.1% reduction in fuel consumption over time to reflect the EV trend. But unfortunately, there are no additional funding sources to reflect that.
Mr. Chair.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, so Commissioner, there's active conversation at the state legislative level to address the loss of revenue. There's multiple approaches that are being discussed. One is a surtax, like a one-time registration fee. The other is trying to gain certain percent of the utility tax that's being collected towards transportation infrastructure. So some positive discussion, definitely.
All right, anything else? Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
All right, now we're at the point of member comments. I'm just going to look around. Anybody have any additional comments they want to make before we go to the next step? All right. Want to remind everybody, thank you for attending today. I know this meeting was long, but I think there was some good discussion and we saw how citizen involvement, sometimes whether it's all what we want or not from the standpoint of what we're doing. It's great to have them involved and you learn from it and hopefully they'll learn from it. But just another quick reminder to register for the 2050 LRTP Phase 3 workshop taking place on Monday, April 28th from 4:30 to 6:30 at State College of Florida, Bradenton campus in Building 3 Library. For more information, please refer to the flyer and the email you received last week. The next MPO meeting is May 19th at 9 a.m. right here, and we hope we'll have another productive meeting. This time will be adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.